Chapter 1754. An undersea city with a population of more than 9 million, it brought a huge amount of energy in the process of rising. Because of this, the seabed even showed signs of cracking. Facing such a huge city that was about to float, humans were absolutely insignificant. This was the legacy of a civilized era, which was enough to shock everyone's mind. Not to mention them who were originally residents of the deep sea, Chinchuyu's shock was no less than theirs. This was the power of civilization, which was different from the mode of cultivators like them. Because it was a cross-domain impact, the shock was so great. At this moment, she couldn't help but think of the human beings on the ground. There were so many countries, and they also walked into the process of modern civilization. However, would it be possible to create such an underwater city with all the powers of the human kingdoms on the surface at this stage? Want to leave here? Naive. It was Sin's voice. Along with the voice, there was a shadow that was much dimmer than the darkness of the deep sea. At this moment, a Sin's body actually expanded crazily. The speed of expansion was so fast that it made people speechless. The constantly expanding Sin finally had its current form. It was actually a huge creature that was almost half the size of the entire undersea city. This looks like an octopus. Miss Chin frowned at this moment. Its original form? She looked at Sin at this moment. It was indeed like a huge octopus that was dyed black all over. The octopus had claws, and the huge claws grew rapidly in an instant, firmly grasping the bottom of the undersea city. At the bottom of the undersea city, the many jets that were used to move the undersea city were now crazily spraying blue flames. Because of the entanglement of the Sin, the entire undersea city actually stopped abruptly. This was an incalculable impact. A large area of the undersea city collapsed in an instant. Prince Yi roared angrily, rushing to one of the tentacles that entangled the undersea city. However, at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared on the tentacle. It was the appearance of a faceless man. One after another, faceless men separated from Sin's tentacles. They didn't completely separate, but each of them was connected to a Sin by black threads. How many faceless men had appeared? There was no way to count them, but they were like a huge army. Damn it, if this goes on. Long Gang couldn't help but feel anxious, but there were already hundreds of faceless men around him, completely surrounding him. He struggled to raise Holy Sword, and slashed out a large number of them. Obviously, these faceless men were much weaker, but they couldn't withstand such an incredible number. Long Gang couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. He quickly glanced around and found that not only him, but also Prince Yi, the blue-blooded giant, and even Chinchuyu were surrounded by these faceless people. All of you, stay here and become my food. None of you are allowed to leave. It was the roar of a deep-sea demon. For the people living in the underwater city, the huge monster outside the city's shield had covered the sky that they were used to seeing on a daily basis. But at this time, the city of the city city of the city of the city city of the city of the city 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 and of the city of the city 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 city. He was a city guard, wearing a kinetic energy armor made by magic energy technology. He raised the weapon in his hand, and under the effect of the thruster of the kinetic energy armor, he resolutely walked out of the city's shield, and directly killed those faceless men. It was like a signal. Bang bang bang! The magic energy light cannons built on the city wall stretched out one after another, directly bombarding the huge tentacles entangling the undersea city. More than a dozen battleships that had just finished the Battle of the Sea Demon Royal Court once again sailed out of Undersea City. On the city wall, there were soldiers of Undersea City with weapons in their hands. Under the brilliance of the White Tower, the Undersea City that was about to leave resolutely chose to participate in the battle at this time. At this time, a blue light shot out from the Undersea City and instantly fell beside Prince Yi. It was Lu Gu, the Witch of Undersea City. Without the holy armor, the Witch of Undersea City was wearing a set of pure white magic energy armor. It was a product of Astral One, and it was a product with the highest performance and specifications that could be created in Undersea City. Prince Yi wanted to say something, but Lu Gu shook her head gently. Even if you have 1,000 reasons, you can't cover up our reason for participating in the battle. Louis, this is no longer your matter alone. Undersea City can't leave now. Things have evolved in the worst direction I've ever thought of. Prince Yi sighed. It's up to you. But some people must stay. They shouldn't be sacrificed here. Don't worry, Lu Gu said quickly. I've asked the royal government to start receiving all the children, young men and women, and a group of technical personnel. They will board the ship and leave by ship. Prince Yi sighed, looked at the Witch of Undersea City who looked like a young girl in front of him, and suddenly smiled. It seems that we have never fought together. This is the first time, and it may also be the last time. I'm willing to fight for your majesty. Then, let's fight. Prince Yi, the Emperor of Undersea City, took a deep breath and then said loudly, White Tower, unleash it to your heart's content. That was the final resting place of the souls of the entire Lemurian civilization. Since some of the ancestors of the shepherds chose to leave the experimental site, the new White Tower had been built. But every time the White Tower was activated, it would consume the soul power of these Lemurians. Every time it was consumed, it meant that a large number of Lemurian souls would dissipate. If it wasn't necessary, the Emperor wouldn't choose to activate the White Tower. But now, he knew that there was no need to hold back. A huge amount of power instantly poured into Prince Ye's body. This vaguely exceeded the limits of what he could bear, causing Prince Ye's body to instantly turn blue. It was as if he had become a miniature blue-blood giant. In an instant, the faceless people around him were reduced to ashes by the light. Louis, you've really made me angry. Sin's voice was like a demon's whisper. At most, I'll spend some time to rebuild Undersea City. I'll let you taste the pain of failure after doing everything you can. A huge tentacle was lifted at this time, and then slapped directly on the light shield of the Undersea City. At the same time, thousands of faceless people gathered together. The last thing that appeared was a dark gray figure. It instantly blocked in front of Prince Yi. I will crush all of your hopes and dreams. No response. Attacking was the best response for Prince Yi at this time. At this time, the army of faceless people collided with the warriors of Undersea City, turning this place into a huge battlefield. I seem to have seen it somewhere. Not far away, when the war finally broke out, Luocchio's voice naturally sounded. In the Royal Library of Undersea City, the mural is so similar. They've obviously tried once. Miss Maid shook her head. Then they failed, and the compromise they chose in the end remained. I still have the urge to collect everything here, Boss Luo said suddenly. It feels like something a madman would say. He stretched out his hand. In front of him was like a blooming bright flower. His palm was so gentle, stroking it across the open space, but he was reluctant to pick it up. All of a sudden, as if it was afraid that the resplendent flower would be destroyed, it slowly withdrew its hand. Boss Luo sighed softly at this time and smiled slightly. Sometimes, it's interesting to just watch. I hope this won't be like a cactus epiphyllum. I hope this kind of rebellious heart can be preserved. Humans are forgetful, Miss Maid said indifferently. Only when a similar crisis appears, it will be like this. I have to say, maybe it's a kind of tragedy. Boss Luo didn't answer, but waved his hand gently. Beside him, a pure white, flying serpent quietly disappeared. Bang, bang, bang. Every time when the huge tentacles in the sky smashed down, the Undersea City seemed to have experienced a terrible earthquake. More than half of the houses had collapsed, and injured people were everywhere. In the control room of the White Tower, Riaz clearly saw that the East 13th Street where he grew up had been completely destroyed. In front of him, on the light screen, the energy value of the Undersea City's protective shield was dropping rapidly. It couldn't hold on for too long. However, the work of taking in the children and young men and women hadn't been completed, although Lyoga had given such an order since she acted as the undersea city emperor and gave a speech. There was too little time left for them. It was a chaotic scene all around. It wasn't a simple life and death battle of a few people, but a battle of more than 9 million people in the entire undersea city. The young man had never experienced such a thing. In the control room, a large number of nerve connection lines gathered on Riaz's body. Tens of thousands of messages crazily hit his brain every second. He needed to give too many orders, mobilizing all the defensive forces of the undersea city, controlling the facilities that were still in good condition, opening the way for the taking in work. Finally, he used the voices of the people in the undersea city to hear from the White Tower. This was already too much for him to bear. He immediately knelt on the ground, sweat pouring down like rain, and his body couldn't help but start trembling. "I can't do it. I can't do it. I really—" "Riaz!" The siren girl hurriedly supported Riaz, but she saw that Riaz's eyes were already starting to lose focus. She couldn't help but exclaim, "His mind can't take it anymore. This is too heavy for him." Madame Kaya quickly walked over. She took a deep breath and resolutely removed all the connections on Riaz's body. Then, under Helen's shocked gaze, she connected them all into her body. Madame Kaya almost fell to the ground as soon as she connected them. Her face immediately became extremely pale. This silly child. He actually held on until now. "Madame Kaya, I'm fine." Madame Kaya gritted her teeth and struggled to stand up. "You know what a lord is. A lord is someone who can still stand at a time like this." With that, Madame Kaya closed her eyes. The battle was much more tragic than she had imagined. The faceless people seemed to be endless, and it was impossible to kill them all. However, the soldiers of Heidi City were constantly being shot down. After being shot down, the soldiers weren't killed immediately. They were all wrapped up by the black cocoons of the faceless people and hung on the tentacles of sin. There were so many of them that it made one's scalp go numb. It made one feel despair. Are you all right?" Ever since Madame Kaya had taken over, Riaz had been brought to a corner to sit down. However, Riaz was currently hugging his knees as his body trembled. He stared ahead in a daze as his lips trembled, as if he wanted to say something. "Riaz, can you hear me?" At this moment, Helen knelt in front of Riaz and put her forehead on Riaz's forehead. Then, she began to chant the siren's soul chant. Bit by bit, she tried to calm the chaotic soul in front of her. Am I very useless?" The chant of the soul didn't stop. The siren girl was still pressing her forehead against the boy's. "I can't do anything," Riaz murmured. "I actually want to do something, but I really can't do it. I can't compare to His Majesty. I don't have Lyoga's decisiveness and ability to act." When they were talking, I couldn't even get a word in. I was like a burden. Now I even need my mother to replace me. "Riaz." Helen suddenly stopped and touched Riaz's cheek. The siren girl's eyes suddenly revealed a gentle light. "What are you doing?" Riaz was shocked. She then grabbed both of Riaz's hands. Unknowingly, a dagger had appeared in her hands. She held Riaz's hands and pointed the dagger at her heart. The siren girl smiled and said, "Do you know? The sirens are a race that can do anything for the person they like. We never regret." "I don't want this." He threw the dagger away in shock. "You've been lying to me all this time. Are you going to stand by and do nothing?" Helen said softly. At this moment, the huge tentacle in the sky finally broke the light shield of the undersea city. This unimaginably huge tentacle swept across the city. It swept away countless buildings in an instant. Finally, it swept to the White Tower of the undersea city. The control room instantly turned into darkness. The huge light of the White Tower dissipated instantly. On the battlefield, the blue light on Prince Ye's body instantly dimmed. He suddenly fell down. Countless faceless people swarmed forward at this moment, drowning him in an instant. No! At this time, the Witch of Undersea City let out a mournful scream and rushed forward recklessly. Black threads began to crawl out of her body at this time. The blue-blooded giant, who lost control, stopped at once. Long Gang, who couldn't stand on his own, was even more desperate. His expression changed in shock. He raised his head and looked at the huge shadow that he couldn't see clearly. Finally, he gritted his teeth, burned himself, and stabbed at it crazily. However, a black gust of wind blew him down in an instant. Ah, it's time to eat. Sin laughed wantonly. It's a good choice to eat until I'm full in one go. He was falling. He fell from the White Tower. How long would it take to reach the ground from such a high distance? Riaz suddenly felt that his mathematics knowledge was not enough. Under such circumstances, why would he care about this kind of thing? Helen, mother, not far away, Helen and Madame Kea were also falling. However, they fainted because of the impact. Riaz wanted to reach out to them, but he couldn't. Below, the entire undersea city was no longer what he remembered. As the symbol of Undersea City, the White Tower that he could see every day since he was born began to collapse. It was over. He didn't want to give up. What could he do? Riaz, don't give up. The voice, along with the wind, entered Riaz's heart. In his blurred vision, Riaz seemed to see a light, a dazzling radiance. This voice is... He struggled to open his eyes. However, he saw that there was something falling from above. Amidst the falling rocks, there was a pure white figure. Asla, Riaz murmured, this is my flying serpent. He subconsciously reached out to the flying serpent. It was getting closer and closer. The voice became clearer in Riaz's heart. Finally, Riaz's hand touched a corner of the flying serpent. This is not White Qilin. This is... Riaz's consciousness suddenly surged. In this moment of despair, he suddenly turned around and sat on the pure white, flying serpent. I want to do something. This was the young man's heart. Then, his body turned into light. A blue, pure light. It was not only him. Starting from him, or perhaps from his call, the falling Madame Kea was also covered in a blue, sparkling light. It was not only here. In the deep sea, on the battlefield, Prince Yi, who was drowned by the faceless people, naturally emitted a pure blue light. The blue light dispersed all the faceless people. He looked at his hands and body in surprise. He muttered to himself, awakening? But why is this power different? He looked over and saw that Lyoga's body was also emitting this clear blue light. Below her, a similar light bloomed. It came from Long Gang. At the same time, in the deep sea, the blue blood, that was still motionless, suddenly let out a long howl. It seemed to be roaring and calling for something. Its body also began to emit this pure light. Louis, this is... Lyoga was the closest to Prince Yi. She looked at him in disbelief. This is... Prince Yi said thoughtfully, resonance. The resonance of all the blue blood people. A huge light pillar suddenly appeared in the distance. It was so eye-catching in the darkness. It came from the direction of the Samna Trench. The holy sword, in Long Gang's hand, was vibrating. White Tower. It's the Tomb Keeper's White Tower. At this time, the holy sword suddenly left Long Gang's hand and rushed into the sky. At the same time, the holy armor automatically peeled off from the blue blood giant. It rushed to the location of the holy sword and merged with it. In the end, it still looked like a sword, but it was much bigger. The brand new holy sword shot into the underwater city. A young man riding a pure white, flying serpent that looked like a Pegasus raised his arm and held the new holy sword in his hand. The broken white tower of the underwater city was shining. This was its last light. Finally, the young man riding the Pegasus, flying serpent, raised the holy sword high and turned into a dot of light, rushing into the darkness. At this moment, as if feeling the threat of this dot of light, Sin suddenly began to shrink its body. Is this your last resistance? Then, feel the more powerful despair. A roar sounded, but at this moment tens of thousands of vertical green sword lights illuminated the darkness at the same time. In this darkness, there was another ray of light that bloomed at an unknown time. It was a green lotus. It wrapped the fairy in white tightly. At this moment, Chinchuyu's eyes were sparkling with star-like light. The vertical green sword light turned in an instant and stabbed at all the tentacles of Sin. Imprisonment, a temporary imprisonment. Green Lotus! Sin screamed in anger with a hint of fear. But at this moment of imprisonment, the young man who turned into a light had already rushed into its body. The light was completely swallowed by the darkness. The sword lights used to imprison were all broken. Chinchuyu spurted out a mouthful of blood, and then her body fell down slowly. Everything became quiet after the light young man crashed into the darkness. Lyoga looked up in a daze, her palms oozing with cold sweat. She subconsciously grabbed Prince Ye's arm. Father, did he fail? Prince Yi lowered his head, frowning. Suddenly, he clenched his fist. And me! As he said, Prince Yi pushed Lyoga away. Suddenly, the Emperor of the underwater city also turned into a blue light, crashing into the darkness. He plunged in. Louis! 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 Sin's body shook crazily. Those numerous huge tentacles were crazily slapping everything. Finally, the slapping stopped, and the tentacles fell down one by one. At this moment, a light broke out from the darkness, illuminating the entire deep sea. Louis! With a shrill and angry scream, Sin's body was pierced by countless lights. Finally, the darkness dissipated. A ball of faint light slowly fell down from above. Lyoga and Long Gang approached at the same time. In the faint light, the Emperor of the underwater city was holding the young man, slowly descending, and finally landing in front of the two. Riaz! A touch of fear flashed in Long Gang's eyes. Him? He? Lyoga looked at this young face with a complicated expression. He's fine. The Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. He just exhausted his strength and fell asleep, and Long Gang and Lyoga looked at him at the same time. The Emperor of the underwater city smiled, which was a relieved smile that Lyoga had never seen before. We won. Then, the Emperor of the undersea city fell headfirst. ######PS 5484. Chapter 1755. Lady Kaya had arrived on one of the official rescue ships. Ever since the light dispelled the darkness, the underwater city once again welcomed darkness, but this was the darkness of the deep sea environment. Due to the outer shield of the underwater city being destroyed, the entire city was directly submerged by the deep sea water. This was also the first time the people of the underwater city were so close to the environment they had always lived in. A transmission light connected the few people on the battlefield to the rescue ship. Looking at the Emperor and Riaz lying on the medical bed, Madame Kaya was obviously more concerned about her child. However, the Emperor's condition could not be ignored. The rescue ship brought along a doctor. After a silent and urgent examination, the military doctor with superb medical skills could not help but look a little gloomy. There's good news and bad news. The military doctor looked at the people crowded in the cabin. This young man's condition is just exhaustion, there's no danger to his life. But His Majesty. What's wrong with him? Lyoga grabbed the military doctor's collar. His Majesty's cells are rapidly deteriorating. The military doctor said with a pale face, I've never seen such a situation. It's like a night light that's about to run out of magic energy. **T. The witch of the underwater city gritted her teeth and looked like she was about to throw the military doctor out, but in the end she slowly loosened her grip. Immediately summon all those qualified to practice medicine in the underwater city. Even those who are still in school. He can't die. Madame Lyoga, Forgive me for not being able to say things like, "Don't worry." The military doctor took a deep breath and said, "But I'll do my best. I suggest that we temporarily freeze His Majesty's body. This may temporarily stop the aging of his cells." "Do it." The witch of the underwater city waved her hand and agreed, then said, "Also, the Emperor's injury cannot be announced. You need to keep this a secret. I'll keep an eye on you." As she spoke, the witch of the underwater city directly activated the disguise tool on her wrist and once again disguised herself as Louis XXXIX. Seeing this, the accompanying military doctor widened his eyes in shock. He was not afraid of Lyoga's current action, but the meaning behind it. Obviously, since the witch of the underwater city did not hide the fact that she was pretending to be the Emperor, it meant that he already needed to keep this a secret. Perhaps with his life. The rescue ship slowly sailed into the underwater city that was now submerged by the sea. "What is it?" "I can help you." Long Gang looked tired, but his eyes were full of energy as he asked, "I do need you and Kaya's help." The undersea city witch quickly said, "Louis is down and so is Riaz. But we're still here. This is the underwater city that Louis protected with his life. I don't want to see it destroyed like this, so—" The demoness directly appeared before Long Gang and Kaya and bowed. "I hope you can help me rebuild the underwater city, so that they can see it when they awaken." "What are you saying?" Long Gang waved his hand. "Even if you don't say it, I will do it." "Then, give the order, Your Majesty." "As you command, Your Majesty," Madame Kaya said softly. Boss Luo smiled. "Perhaps one day, this civilization will once again be exposed to the light of day and walk freely. With an additional advanced civilization like this, aren't you afraid that the other countries in the world will be worried?" Boss Luo chuckled. "Come to think of it, with the people's ability to withstand the increase, they shouldn't be completely panicked. The bottom of the sea was the bottom of the sea. This was something that happened at the bottom of the sea. However, on land, the structure of the world was undergoing intense changes like a chemical reaction. The journey is about to end." Miss Maid glanced at the underwater city. This city was clearly no longer suitable for a holiday. "There are still some small matters." Boss Luo nodded. "Let's deal with them." It was a black oval-shaped object. It looked like a black egg the size of a normal ostrich egg. Half of it was buried in the mud of the seabed. The other half that was exposed suddenly cracked open. Then, a grayish-black creature that looked like a thin octopus crawled out with difficulty. Very soon, it crawled out of the eggshell and was rapidly absorbing something. It was the strands of black threads that drifted around in the deep sea. Its body began to grow slowly. I didn't expect that the creature created with the genes of blue blood would finally obtain this kind of evolution. The power of blue blood bloodline can already touch me. This was, sin, a small part that it finally separated from itself. Shout as much as you want. New life, hope. When everything is moving towards a bright future, the sudden darkness will make it extremely fragile. Ha 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 ha. Time was almost meaningless to it. As a spiritual body of fear, it was even immortal and difficult to be obliterated. Perhaps the next time it woke up from its deep sleep, it would be able to obtain a large wave of delicious food. But now, for it, perhaps the game had just begun. Therefore, it planned to find a place to sleep quietly. But at this moment, a faint fluctuation came from the deep sea. This fluctuation made it, who was sensitive, feel a terrible danger rapidly approaching in an instant. Its octopus-like body instantly began to paddle like a jellyfish. However, in an instant, a white bone palm directly appeared out of thin air and directly grabbed the body of this small creature. Number 08, you need to be recalled. When a sin heard this voice, it even caused fear to appear from the depths of its heart. As a spiritual body of fear, it instantly developed this inconceivable emotion. Who are you? Why do you know me? Me? I am the same as you. I was the same as you. Have you forgotten my voice? That voice slowly rang out, and then slowly dragged Sin into the distorted space. 03. You are. 03. It was still struggling with all its might. A strong desire to escape was born. At this moment, it was at its weakest and most powerless. Do you remember now? It's good that you remember. This can save a lot of trouble. Little by little, half of a Sin's body had been directly dragged into the distorted space. It was already in despair. I seemed to have heard the call of a guest. Then, a gentle voice quietly rang out beside it. Guest, is there anything you need? It instantly opened its eyes wide, and the communication between the two minds was completed in an instant. The remaining spirit of the spiritual body of fear shook wildly at this moment and said, Deal! As you wish. However, its body had completely fallen into the distorted space. The distortion of space even directly healed at this moment. There was no trace of abnormality in this place. But at this moment, a palm casually stretched out, causing the space that had already calmed down to distort again, and then directly reached into it. Well, it's there. Boss Luo at this moment seemed to be searching for something in his pocket. Ah, found it. Then, he pulled out his hand. In his palm, there was a decadent black octopus. Welcome back, Mr. Sin. It suddenly bounced out from Boss Luo's palm and floated in the water. It widened its eyes and asked in an incredulous voice, How did you do it? It's not difficult. Boss Luo smiled slightly. But right at this moment, that white skeletal hand stretched out from the hole in space that had been forcibly distorted once more, and it was accompanied by a trace of anger. No matter who it is, perhaps they should bear some unimaginable consequences. The white bone palm in the depths of the darkness seemed to be able to drag everything into an abyss that would never see the light of day at any time. The aura of fear it brought was even greater than that of a Sin, the spiritual body of fear. But Boss Luo directly grabbed the wrist of the white bone palm and said indifferently, Do you want to come over? If so, I can help you. It's very simple, just gently pull it and it'll be done. As he spoke, Boss Luo didn't use much strength and slowly pulled. The white bone arm was slowly pulled out from the distorted space. The wrist, then the forearm bone, grayish-white in color, the material was like jade. What are you? The white bone arm suddenly burst out a strong silver-gray light. It was wrestling with Boss Luo. But no matter how much strength it exerted, its arm was still pulled out bit by bit. Even its body on the other side of the distorted space was being pulled out bit by bit. What kind of power is this? The owner of the white bone arm suddenly screamed, When I'm ready, I will come again. As he spoke, the white bone palm suddenly broke, and then the white bone arm with the broken palm retracted into the distorted space. Then everything calmed down. It seems that this guest doesn't intend to come here as a guest. Boss Luo picked up the white bone palm at this time and suddenly smiled. I don't know if there will be any customers who feel that this collection is special and want it. Then he handed the white bone arm to Miss Maid to deal with. Boss Luo looked at Sin. Mr. Sin, I've done what you asked. Next, should we talk about the reward? While Boss Luo was talking, Sin took advantage of the stalemate between him and the white bone arm to sneak away. But when the voice rang out, Sin couldn't help but tremble slightly and subconsciously stop. It seemed like it couldn't go anywhere. In such a weak state, how could it deal with this fellow who had so easily forced number 03 to break his own arm to escape? Do you know who that was? Sin's voice was full of fear, although it said that the higher the number, the more powerful the mutants are. In fact, the first 10 numbers are more or less special. It's number 03, which is definitely qualified to compete for one of the 5 strongest mutants. Don't tell me that you're more powerful than the creator of the experimental site. I probably only have the strength to kill a chicken. Boss Luo shook his head. I'm not as powerful as you think. Mr. Sin, this is a digression. Let's talk about the reward now. What is that place? Sin couldn't help but be vigilant. The so-called contract was reached in the mind. But at its level, it had vaguely perceived a strong binding force that forced it to abide by the content of the contract. It's a game-like world. Boss Luo smiled and said, "We developed it not long ago. I hope that Mr. Sin can temporarily serve us in this world. As for the service time, it will be determined according to Mr. Sin's performance." This is equivalent to a life sentence. Sin sneered, "Well, just like how I played with the underwater city for countless years, there will always be stronger people, who will play with me like a toy. Just like, when it was first created, it was used to carry out all kinds of unbearable experiments. It was all because it was weak. Weakness was sin. If you can finally destroy this game world." Unexpectedly, Boss Luo suddenly said, "I'll release you and give you back your freedom." "Really?" Sin looked at the mysterious young man with surprise. Boss Luo chuckled and said, "I'll break my promise later. Now you can only choose to believe it, right?" "You?" Sin's eyes widened. So angry. This black-headed octopus looked a little cute when it widened its eyes. "Go, get familiar with your working environment. Someone will arrange it for you temporarily." Boss Luo waved his hand. "He's called Taisetsu, very easy to talk to." "Then, thank you, Mr. Sin." Boss Luo flicked his finger at this moment. A gentle force suddenly bounced Sin's body backward. It floated backward little by little, and then gradually faded away, finally disappearing into the deep sea. "Don't tell others about what happened just now." Boss Luo looked at Miss Servant Girl, blinking his eyes. He put his finger on his lips and made a gesture of silence. Miss Servant Girl knew that the master was referring to the words he said when he teased Sin. It was somewhat improper. "Master, it's time to take the reward from the Emperor of the Underwater City." Miss Servant Girl reminded him softly. It was a place like nothingness. It was the voice of the owner of the white bone arm. "Yes, I can feel that the other party didn't even use much strength, just like an adult pulling a child. It's me, all my strength disappeared, at that moment." There was a trace of fear in the voice. Well, there was another voice, then it fell into silence. #######PS. As usual. This chapter ends. Chapter 1756. Deep Sea. Underwater City. The underwater city that had lost its gateway was now like a massive cluster of luminous corals growing on the seabed. The broken exterior was quickly mended. This was the result of the entire city abandoning all repair work and doing their best to rescue it. Even so, the underwater city's magical energy reserves were now in jeopardy. Magical energy could only be supplied to important departments such as hospitals, construction units, and so on. Fortunately, this was a place with extremely good security, and there was no need to use limited resources for peacekeeping. Even so, the people of the underwater city who were used to the convenience brought by magical technology were now facing unprecedented difficulties. They needed to personally carry those large tools, and even had to carry them on foot. Everything was progressing slowly. The first day after the Great Calamity. About a few kilometers away from the underwater city. The witch of the underwater city was saying goodbye to the siren here. "Actually, you don't have to leave here." The witch of the underwater city shook her head after a long silence. "This is not the end, this is the beginning of everything. This city is radiating an unprecedented new life." Helen said softly, "Like you said, this is just the beginning. For you, this is rebirth, but for us, this is just the first step into the deep sea." "If you leave and that guy wakes up, what should I say?" Ariel asked the most critical question. "Just be honest." Helen smiled and said, "I think he'll understand. Tell him that if he hears the sirens singing, it means I'm here." "I don't understand you." The witch of the underwater city shook her head. "In the sirens, there is no such thing. The so-called love is ultimately just for the sake of reproduction. Once the nature of reproduction is satisfied, The other party is no longer so important. You might be able to. Helen could not help but smile bitterly. These were two different views on the same issue between two different races, and there was no need to convince each other. Just take it as each expressing their own views. If His Majesty wakes up, please send my regards to him. I will. Lazarite nodded and then said seriously, the sapphire is right in front. Lewis promised you. Don't worry, my people found it in the Somna Trench. It's basically in good condition. Also, your two sisters seem to be in Sapphire's treatment room. This seems to have been arranged by Lewis. Now, Sapphire is yours. Let's meet again if fate allows it. The siren girl leaped backward, and behind her was a cliff at the bottom of the sea. At this time, her long green tail was moving in the sea, and her body was wriggling, quickly disappearing into the deep sea. The witch of the underwater city looked into the distance and remained silent. She just gently stroked her lower abdomen. She sighed rather disappointedly. If I knew that I could defeat sin, I shouldn't have. She also seemed to have some unknown melancholy. Over there. Who can help me? I can't pry open this rock. My house is right below here. My wife's belongings are in my house. I want them back. Somewhere in the chaotic streets of the underwater city, a young man with an expressionless face slowly walked over. He walked to the side of the husband who was looking for his wife's belongings in the ruins, and directly lifted up a huge stone slab. The middle-aged man was stunned. How much strength did this person have when he fell to the ground? Thank you. But he still hurriedly thanked the young man. You're welcome. The young man with great strength directly moved the stone slab to a place, and then dealt with a few similar stones before leaving. Until he left, he still didn't have much expression on his face. Then, he quickly disappeared from the sight of the middle-aged man. But if the middle-aged man could get close to the young man at the beginning, he might be able to hear some words coming from the young man's chest. Damn you, Konghai, when will you let me out of this broken test tube? I feel that my bodily functions are rapidly declining. I need to replenish my energy. My organs have begun to protest. You can't do this to me, I was your master. Your creator. Soon. The expressionless young man lowered his head and said, then stopped, we're here. The central tower, host, in the test tube. 7-star, reluctantly poked its head out. It saw a half-collapsed house. What is this place? This is the place where I've been living after I left the experimental site, Mr. Konghai said calmly. We'll be living here for the next few days. Wait, you said we? The 7-star couldn't help but be shocked. After spitting out a burst of fragrance, it wailed, You're not going to let me go? Why should I let you go? Mr. Konghai blinked and said, when I made this insect body, I didn't give it the basic survival ability. Except for the huge central tower data, your ability is almost the same as ordinary insects. The experimental site has been destroyed, leaving only a solid space. You don't have the ability to rebuild it. If I let you go now, are you sure you won't be swallowed by deep-sea fish before you swim to the gate, or drown after you leave the underwater city? It seemed to make sense, but a 7-star felt that it was not right no matter how he listened. He felt that there was no light in his life. No matter what. I need food. Food. 7-star wailed, it's true. I hate this kind of creature's body. I don't want a creature's body anymore. This is simply a wrong evolution. Facing this chattering central tower, host. Pseudo. Mr. Konghai's choice was to block the test tube and stuff it into his clothes. He looked at the collapsed house in front of him, then pushed open the half-broken door and walked in. I'm back, Professor. In the palace, in front of the bed piled with instruments to detect vital signs, Riaz opened his eyes little by little. What came into view was a pair of plump lips. The king of Mojito was right in front of his eyes. Ah! Riaz exclaimed in shock. Ah! King Mojito couldn't help but scream. Then, the man and the ape looked at each other deeply. After a long time, Riaz swallowed his saliva and said, Why are you here? King Mojito shrugged his shoulders. They are all busy. I'm the most idle here, so I'm here to look after you. This is the palace? Riaz quickly walked down from the bed, pulled out the syringe, and opened the window. It was not very bright outside, like the time after sunset and before night finally arrived. It's so dark. I heard that it's to save energy. Mojito shook his head and said, I don't like this place at all. It's wet everywhere. After I came out, I realized that the Boulder Kingdom is much better than this broken place. Riaz smiled bitterly, then rubbed his eyebrows and sat down again. Mojito, can you tell me what happened after that? I seem to have forgotten some things. Then listen. King Mojito nodded and told Riaz in detail what he knew and saw. After an unknown amount of time, Riaz finally let out a sigh of relief. It's only been a day, and so many things have happened. With that, Riaz hurriedly got up again with an impatient look. Where are you going? I want to see His Majesty the Emperor. Riaz did not look back. After throwing out a sentence quickly, he rushed out of the room. Mojito did not have the time to stop him, but in the time it took to turn his head, Riaz hurriedly ran back. Just as Mojito was about to speak, Riaz suddenly threw him on the bed and began to grope his body. Riaz, what do you want to do? Mojito was shocked. Found it, Riaz said quickly. Before the king of the Boulder Kingdom could react, Riaz had rushed out of the room again. At this time, Mojito seemed to have noticed something and quickly lifted his breastplate. His face immediately changed. The piece of scale left by Iska was gone. Along the way, the young man did not even see the servants in the palace. It was not until the place where His Majesty the Emperor was being treated that Riaz saw a group of people in medical uniforms. I want to go in and see His Majesty. How is he? Riaz said quickly. I'm sorry, Lady Lyoga has ordered that no one is allowed to contact His Majesty. The military doctor in charge of treatment walked out. We have to ensure His Majesty's safety. But Riaz was about to say something. At this time, the voice of the underwater city, which came from behind him, let him go in. I'll go in with him. You all stay outside. But, Lady Lyoga, His Majesty's current situation, he's qualified. The witch walked over expressionlessly and glanced at Riaz casually. Then, she looked at the military doctor and said, This guy looks really unreliable, but he did save the entire underwater city. No one is more qualified than him. Without opening the door, he immediately saw Prince Yi. They even had to go through a long passage. The two walked in silence in the passage. Lyoga walked in front, neither too fast nor too slow. Riaz couldn't help but have a lot on his mind. He wanted to speak a few times. Helen left. The witch of the underwater city didn't stop walking and said this. Riaz subconsciously stopped. After opening his mouth, he put down his step and continued to follow her. He responded softly, Okay, I got it. She said she doesn't like a good-for-nothing like you. If it wasn't for Louis's order, she wouldn't even want to get close to you. She told you to go die on your own. She took the sapphire and went somewhere else to play. Okay. Riaz still nodded. You don't seem to care at all? This time, the witch of the underwater city turned around. Riaz looked at her and said seriously, Why should I care about your nonsense here? Violent woman, I feel that your words should be more or less the same as the original words. You're really confident. The witch of the underwater city sneered. Think whatever you want. We're here. The radiance produced when magic energy was released was all around. The emperor of the underwater city was currently immersed in a crystal container of blue liquid. His body had been completely frozen. This blue was the blue light of freezing. Riaz wiped the liquid in front of the container. His Majesty, his situation is very bad. Lyoga's voice wasn't as stiff as before. His cells are constantly breaking and can't be repaired. Through the test, the blue blood in his body has completely dried up. He has also lost the ability to repair his body. If he wasn't frozen in time, he wouldn't have survived yesterday. I didn't do my best. Riaz sighed. I can't blame you. Lyoga shook her head. Even though I really want to find someone, especially you, to vent my anger, I know that I can't blame you. I don't even have the right to say anything to you. I want to look at His Majesty here alone. Is that okay? Riaz suddenly said. The witch of the underwater city couldn't help but frown. She hesitated for a moment and finally stared into Riaz's eyes. He didn't avoid it. This time, he just looked at her calmly. Don't take too long, the witch of the underwater city said faintly. Then, she slowly backed away. Before she finally closed the door, she said, Listen, he is the only one I care about in the entire underwater city. I can let you stay here alone, but please don't disappoint me. Riaz stood in front of the container and looked at the frozen Prince Yi. After a while, he slowly took out the scale. The power of the bloodline naturally flowed into the scale. Then, a shadow began to appear. The person in the light and shadow was currently speaking in a monotonous manner. I think you should also want to see what she looks like, Riaz muttered to himself. I clearly know the pain of awakening the blue blood, so… Your Majesty, if you don't want to wake up, then keep sleeping. You are the one who has the qualifications to not feel pain. When Riaz walked out again, he was met with the hopeful gaze of the witch of the underwater city. He actually knew what Lyoga was thinking. She might think that he, who had completely awakened the blue blood, might have the ability to improve Prince Ye's condition. I probably disappointed you. Riaz shook his head at this time. I'm sorry. I don't have much expectations. Lyoga snorted softly and turned to leave. Where are you going? There are still a lot of things to do outside. The witch of the underwater city did not turn her head. Although Louis's situation is not good, it is not bad either. I can't just do nothing. This is his underwater city. I won't let it be ruined now. So, I will do everything I can and wait for him to wake up. Take me with you. Riaz quickly walked up at this time. I should be able to help with the repair. You? I saved the underwater city. Trash, trash. Violent woman, it was noisy, and the voices gradually faded away. Then, Riaz did not receive any special treatment because of this. He was directly assigned to a basic position by the witch of the underwater city to do some repair work within his ability. This damn violent woman. While cursing, Riaz still put on his helmet and plunged into the repair shop. There was a steady stream of magical tools that could still be repaired here. Fortunately, his body was strong and healthy at the moment. He had the strength to fight against dozens of strong men, so this kind of repair work was not too difficult. Wait a minute. What's this? Riaz's jaw dropped when he saw the new batch of maintenance products. The master who delivered this batch of repair products looked at it and said, This is salvaged from the battlefield. It looks like it can still be repaired. At this time, Riaz suddenly ran to the pile of scrap and randomly flipped through the various fragments, parts, and tools one by one. Finally, he pulled out the thing inside. What appeared in front of him was a dim, flying serpent. The flying serpent was now broken, leaving only the core parts and an ordinary body shell. Riaz reached out and gently stroked the core of the flying serpent, and tears unknowingly flowed down. When he fell from the white tower and the Pegasus, flying serpent, appeared, the sound he heard was the sound of spending too much money. He was right here. The symbiosis of soul and machine. Just like Azra White Chelan, he was right here. I will fix you, I will definitely fix you. Then, together, we will participate in the flying serpent competition. Suddenly, there was a slight distortion in the air. In the quiet frozen room, two figures welcomed. Boss Luo bent down and picked up the scale on the ground. Suddenly, his palm released a blue light. The woman in the light suddenly distorted, and then the thousands of messages were suddenly interrupted. The woman in the light began to speak another paragraph. Therefore, it is almost impossible to destroy sin. Regarding this problem, I have argued with this stubborn fellow many times. But it is really cute when this fellow is angry. You know, this fellow Yi actually has not lived happily since he was born. I've heard him talking in his sleep in the middle of the night. That guy seems to have been sent by Emperor Karl to be extracted as an ingredient for immortality due to his high innate talent. But because his bloodline is too strong, he survived. All these years, this fellow has been serving as Emperor Karl's consumable. He lied to himself. He lied to himself. These things have never happened. He sealed these memories in the deepest part of his heart. He even molded Emperor Karl into an image of someone who was willing to suffer for the sake of Undersea City. Because of his self-deception, he even continued to hone himself on how to destroy the sin and inherit the will of this fake Emperor Karl. If not, this fellow would have probably collapsed long ago. If possible, I might hope that Yi has never come to this despairing world. When the woman in the light said these words, one after another, black balls slowly floated out from Prince Ye's body and then floated to Miss Maid's hand. Not more, not less, exactly 20. The number of balls that could only be achieved by exterminating the entire Sea Demon Royal Court. Boss Luo directly put the scale in his hand beside the container. If we didn't meet Riaz at the beginning, but a Sea Demon Royal, he said softly, it would probably be another story. Suddenly it was quiet. In the frozen room, the woman in the light said the same words again and again. The soft light was covering the frozen blue light. They didn't mix, but they were tightly attached. Hashtag 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 PS 5584. Chapter 1757. Before leaving, Ms. Maid quietly ran to the first Magic Research Institute in Undersea City. Not for anything else, but to retrieve the modified, flying tumbler that was previously detained here for research. Azra White Qilin. In the core of this flying tumbler, after all, the soul fragment of a powerful creature from another world was sealed. Of course, it was impossible to keep it in the Magic Research Institute and let the technicians of Undersea City study it. Because there was nothing else to do in Undersea City, Boss Luo, who had just finished a short trip, was in high spirits. He directly changed into a motorcycle suit, rode on Azra White Qilin, and took Ms. Maid for a spin in the deep sea. They planned to drive Azra White Qilin all the way back to the seaside town, St. Andrews. But before leaving Undersea City, Azra White Qilin temporarily stopped at Somna Trench. There was a gate to the test site here. Boss Luo and Ms. Maid once again entered the test site without using the key. After the war, the key had been recovered by Undersea City. A total of 2 pairs of keys were now in the hands of the Witch of Undersea City. Listening to the discussion between the descendants of the Blue Bloods, they seemed to intend to rebuild the test site that had been reduced to ruins as a reserve territory for Undersea City. It was hard to say whether they wanted to occupy the test site or not, but one thing was worth considering. They were indeed the descendants of the herdsman, and the herdsman was born in the test site. Perhaps they did not have to move into this test site. After all, although the test site was destroyed, it still had many secrets buried in history. Sin, a blue blood, and even a blue lotus. They did not know how many terrifying creatures like Sin had escaped from the test site. In the future, when they really built the test site into a suitable place for living, would those terrifying creatures that had escaped from the test site suddenly appear? The Witch of Undersea City left the key probably to let Undersea City have a way out. When there was another irresistible disaster, it could be the last shelter for all residents of Undersea City. Only the blue-blooded giant was still in the experimental site at this time. As for all the 6-armed apes in the Kingdom of Boulder, they were later let out by King Mojito to participate in the reconstruction of the underwater city. Perhaps in the near future, there would be another race in Underwater City. Perhaps they could coexist. The blue-blooded giant was retrieved after the battle. Long Gang and Lu Gu worked together to lead it all the way back to the experimental site, and then closed the door. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid arrived here, the blue-blooded giant was at the seaside, hunting for food. It had been sealed for too long, and it didn't have the long evolution time like the mutants that escaped or were released early on. Now, it was probably driven by instinct, causing its appetite to increase greatly. Young Miss Lu Gu, you're keeping the blue-blooded giant here as a form of insurance in the future, right? Boss Luo smiled casually and said, after he has awakened, he seems to be able to link up with a blue blood, and doesn't need a holy armor anymore. This young man may become one of the most powerful ones in this subworld. Miss Maid smiled gently at this time. Her legs were immersed in the sea, and she would occasionally kick them lightly. Okay, the person we're waiting for is here. In the distance, a figure in white fluttering clothes flew over on a green sword light. The reason why they stayed here was actually to wait for someone, Qin Qiu. At the end of the battle, Fairy Qin, who tried her best to temporarily imprison a sin and then fell into the deep sea, disappeared. When the soldiers of Underwater City began to clean up the battlefield, they didn't find her. But in fact, she had already sneaked into the experimental site unknowingly. When the female demon of Underwater City and Long Gang joined forces to drive the blue-blooded giant in, she used some Taoist magic arts to deceive the two. But this Fairy Qin probably didn't think that after the gate of the experimental site was closed, she obviously couldn't get out of it. In just one day, she had flown back and forth around the experimental site several times. Except for the ruins and the central tower that couldn't be restored, she didn't know how to restore it. There was only the huge ocean in this space. Obviously, she wouldn't starve to death here. Not to mention that she could avoid eating by meditating. Although the experimental site had turned into ruins, she could still find something to eat, right? However, it was very embarrassing. When Fairy Qin landed and saw Boss Luo and Miss Maid, she obviously felt a little embarrassed, but she had always been a cold fairy, so she was very good at keeping up appearances. I've checked all the places here. Fairy Qin directly said indifferently, I didn't find anything valuable. Or, there's something that only you can find. Look at how good Fairy Qin was at talking. She pretended that she was actually trapped in such a wonderful way, and at the same time probed for information. Miss Maid suddenly thought of something interesting. Taiyinzi and Qin Qiu were really from the same school. The same teacher? And he seemed to be her senior brother? We didn't find anything special. Boss Luo chuckled. This place has indeed been destroyed, leaving only this solid space and this land waiting to be rejuvenated. Fairy Qin nodded slightly, and then didn't say anything. People like her who had dealt with the shop were very clear about the principle of getting along with the shop. If you don't need to talk, don't take the initiative to talk, and be passive all the time. Boss Luo probably knew this Fairy Qin's thoughts. At this moment, he smiled slightly. Earlier, Miss Qin bought a temporary residence here. Now, there's only half a year left. Miss Qin, if you continue to stay outside, the time will pass. Don't you plan to use the remaining time? Then I'll use it. Qin Qiu nodded, now. Boss Luo waved his hand and a white light instantly covered this white fairy. The shop has to change the decoration, don't mind. Miss Qin. Then, I wish you a happy life. She watched the young man in front of her gradually disappear from her sight. In fact, she was the one who disappeared. The next moment, this white fairy had already appeared in a Western-style exquisite room. This white fairy couldn't help but be silent. That feeling of being seen through was not a good feeling, especially when she had to act as if nothing had happened. Qin Qiu really felt that she needed to concentrate on cultivation for a while. Since she found her master's green lotus sword song in the Punglai treasure house, she had been relying on the power of the green lotus sword song all the way, and it seemed that she didn't stop. The increase in power even made her a little impatient. The experience in the underwater city made this white fairy feel that her current strength was not enough. It was better to use the special environment of the shop to cultivate and continue to comprehend. While she was thinking, someone knocked on the door of the room. A tall and beautiful woman in a maid costume slowly walked in with a maid costume in her hands and said slowly, "You must be Miss Cheen." "Hello, my name is Eve, and I'm Yu's maidservant. My master told me to prepare this for you, Miss Cheen. She said that you should do what you normally do." The white fairy's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch when she saw the maid costume in Eve's hands. How could she have forgotten about this? She sighed inwardly and waved her hand, refusing Eve's offer to help her change into the maid costume. Then, she quickly closed the door of the room. Soon, Miss Cheen, who had changed into a new maid costume, passed through the door and appeared in the Butterfly Society in the next second. This was the real body of the shop. During this time, Boss Luo and Miss Maid had gone on a long journey, so Eve took time to take care of the Butterfly Society. This is... Looking at the woods outside the old school where the Butterfly Society was located, Cheen Chu frowned subconsciously. "Where is this place?" "Britain." "What? This isn't Kelowna." Finally, Miss Cheen's face was no longer cold. She opened her mouth slightly and almost cursed out loud. No wonder she felt that the spiritual essence here was not as dense as that in Kelowna. After the Mount Tai incident, the spiritual essence in Kelowna was extremely dense. Explode. 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 Ah ha 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 ha. Explode. F***ck. She danced with joy. Looking at the dancing Kelowna Shinryu squatting in front of the computer, Luo Dance, the second-in-command and nurse of the pet hospital, couldn't help but sigh. It's over, Sister Long had completely become useless. She was so happy that she got an equipment in the game, as if she had lost her mind. She didn't look like the majesty of Kelowna Shinryu at all. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The butterfly monster had to heavily knock on the table several times. "Sister Long? Look at you, you are either playing games, sleeping or eating. You haven't taken a bath for 3 days and 3 nights. Do you think you can get rid of the impurities on your body by force like before? Look at your hair, you can even drip oil." Then, a dressing mirror was placed in front of Kelowna Shinryu by the butterfly monster. She subconsciously looked into the mirror. What she saw was a face with sticky hair, an oily face, bloodshot eyes, pale lips, and 2 large eye bags. Is this me?" Long Shirua subconsciously opened her mouth. "Humph!" The butterfly monster snorted, taking away the mirror, and then said with arms akimbo, "Look at you! You drink several boxes of happy water a day. Look at your belly, you can't hide it any more." The true dragon of the godly land looked down subconsciously and reached out to touch his lower abdomen. Suddenly, he pinched with 2 fingers and a layer of flesh appeared. She couldn't help holding her chin and fell into meditation. "Pretend." The butterfly monster snorted again, "Where are your feet?" At this time, Kelowna Shinryu was typing with her feet to show that she was still online and didn't cheat her teammates. Finally, the pet hospital's second-in-command got angry and pulled open the curtains. The sun was high up in the sky. The dazzling sunlight instantly pierced the eyes of Kelowna Shinryu, almost blinding her. Too dazzling. At this time, the light was so dazzling for her. This was the light that had just been recharged. Pull the curtains, it's too dazzling. Sister Long, the sun outside is so good. You should go out for a walk." The butterfly monster directly pulled Kelowna Shinryu's arm and pulled her out of the room. "Don't. I still have a copy. Sister Long, there are a lot of people in the city these days, you should go out for a walk." The little butterfly monster stopped. "I heard from Uncle Bull Monster that these people are very restless. The smell of gunpowder is very strong. Many of these guys have been fighting outside the city where they can use their power. There have been several conflicts these days. But the administration is still there. Kelowna Shinryu was still trying to make the last resistance. The butterfly monster said sternly, "Everyone in the city can't use their power. The people in the administration can still use their power, but what about outside? There were no restrictive spells outside, okay? You're Kelowna Shinryu, they're already causing trouble in your territory, do you still care about it? I'm so angry." The true dragon of the godly land had no idea when this little butterfly monster was born with the attribute of an old mother. The true dragon of the godly land could not help but feel a headache. He wondered if this little girl had really grown up and if she should get married so that he could have some peace. Even so, why are you angry? Long Shirua couldn't help but shake her head. Usually, you won't be angry about these things. The butterfly monster said angrily at this time. This morning, Grandpa Fox, who often provides us with indigo root, was accidentally injured by a group of people fighting when he went to dig for medicine. Grandpa Fox is already so old, those people are really, they didn't even apologize when they hit him, they even pushed the blame to each other. The people in the administration said that it's difficult to manage, saying that it's an international problem, and they haven't found an accurate answer yet. Don't you think it's infuriating? Sister Long, what are you doing? At this time, the true dragon of the divine land suddenly bit a hairband and tied up his long hair. He sneered and said, "What are you doing? Of course. I'm going to beat someone up." Character: Your man doesn't want you anymore. Prompt: offline. ######## PS. As usual. Chapter 1758. It was a good idea to hold the Global Extraordinary Summit in Kelowna, because there was a ready-made forbidden land that could prevent any extraordinary beings from causing any damage during the summit. The security level was at its highest. The reason why this forbidden land could bring so much confidence to the administration of Divine Land was that it had been verified. After verification, they learned that the Fire Cloud Evil God, who was the strongest in the administration, had truly become an old man after stepping into this city. Even the Shinryu of Kelowna stayed at home quietly. What was there for the administration to be worried about? Of course not. Yen Xiaoxi was in the office, looking at a group of people who were in charge of various affairs for the summit. It was a scary thing when the section chief was angry. Everyone in the office looked away. Who approved this? Section Chief Yen threw a document onto the table. You want to empty a temple and let those Hindus who drink the water of the Ganges live there? Which bastard came up with this idea? Come out. A man in glasses behind the table raised his hand and stood up, trembling. Section Chief, please listen to me. I had no choice but to do this. The monks of Ganges said that we have to ensure that they have time to do their homework 3 times a day. That temple is the quietest place we can find. What about the hotel? What about the entertainment venues nearby? Which one can't be closed? Do you have to empty this Erlang temple? Section Chief Yen snorted. Just now, someone who claimed to be the successor of Immortal Erlang called the headquarters. Do you know what he said? What did he say? An even more stubborn man asked curiously. Then, his colleagues looked at him with concern. He said that the administration is bullying the weak and oppressing the weak. He said that we are destroying Immortal Erlang, and destroying the peace of Kelowna. The successor of this Immortal Erlang even cried in front of the 100 Tribulations, Taoist of Kunlun. But we've never heard of Immortal Erlang passing down any Immortal Erlangs, Immortal Erlang. The bespectacled man was stunned. Where did this successor come from? How would I know where he came from? Yen Xiaoxi snorted. I'll give you half a day. If you don't settle this matter, you'll be transferred to the First Research Institute to be an assistant developer. God knows if he could come out alive after being transferred. The bespectacled man turned pale and hurriedly rushed out of the meeting room. Don't worry, I promise to complete the mission given by the administration. However, Section Chief Yen was clearly still angry. She got someone to bring out a huge stack of documents. These are the complaints from the local government. I'm just 2 days late because I was in a meeting at the headquarters. Look at all of you, you're a bunch of good-for-nothings. Chief, you can't blame us for this. A man in his 40s who looked rather experienced said bitterly. Although this place is completely forbidden, it doesn't prohibit human emotions and desires. Moreover, this is the first time in history that all sorts of monsters have come running here, even though it's said to be a meeting between superhumans of a great nation. You see, even Equatorial Guinea can have a guy who claims to be a local priest to join in the fun. God damn it, who knows how such a poor place can raise a transcendent priest? Yeah, Section Chief, you can't blame us for this. The people gathered in this city are all used to being domineering in their own territories. This time, they're here as representatives of various countries. I know that we've definitely received a lot of complaints, but that doesn't mean that we didn't do anything. In fact, we've received so many complaints, and even though we feel wronged, we're still busy and persevering with our work. It's just that we don't have enough manpower, and there are too many transcendents from all over the world. That's right. It's better if they're just representatives from large countries or countries with a long history. They can control themselves and stay put, but I suspect that they're not civilized at all. Section Chief, I'm in charge of internal affairs. Yesterday I received dozens of unreasonable requests. They wanted me to dance in the middle of the night, to sound the death knell at noon, and even to find women. Not only that, they even wanted men. Where am I supposed to find men? So you found women for them? Yen Xiaoxi snorted coldly. The section chief glared at her again. At this moment, Yen Xiaoxi heaved a long sigh and said coldly, "The Administrative Bureau is the Administrative Bureau. I don't need such bureaucratic methods. Remember, if any of you have eaten anything from the representatives, spit it out and return it to them. I won't pursue the matter this time, but if I receive another complaint on the day of the summit." The section chief stood up slowly and said, "All of you will be sent to the First Research Institute as assistant researchers." Everyone shuddered while Section Chief Yen strode out of the conference room. The rest of the people looked at each other and began criticizing. However, they could not find anyone to take the blame. "All right, we've already scolded them. The fact that we're not going to be punished directly means that this matter will be settled for the time being." Lu Mingho, who had been silent all this while and was in charge of the Administrative Bureau, stood up and said, "Everyone, stop shirking your responsibilities. There are still a few days left. Let's do our jobs well." Given Lu Mingho's position, he did not have the right to sit in the conference room. However, he was in charge of the Administrative Bureau and hence had a special status. Everyone fell silent at this moment. They stared at the local tyrant quietly and then began criticizing him again. Lu Mingho coldly glanced around and shook his head. Until he left, no one was willing to call out to him. Wei Zidao, who was waiting outside, saw Lu Mingho and hurriedly walked towards him. "Brother Lu, what's the situation inside? I heard that the section chief from Capital City seemed to be very angry." "What else could it be?" Lu Mingho humphed and said, "They're all big shots from Capital City. That's the situation." Wei Zidao was speechless. "I told you that you don't understand. If you did, you would have been working in the Provincial Bureau." Lu Mingho shook his head and said, "Let's go, we can't talk here. Let's find a place and have something to eat with me. By the way, why are you looking for me?" "Oh, it's like this," Wei Zidao quickly said. "Just now, Consultant Long called and asked about the Nordic delegation." "The Nordic ambassadors?" Lu Mingho frowned and said, "I remember that the Nordic ambassadors don't live in the city. Instead, they built a villa outside the city." "What did she ask?" "Nothing much. She just asked where they lived and said that she was going to pay them a visit." Wei Zidao thought for a moment and continued, "Then I told her." "The Nordic ambassadors? The Nordic ambassadors?" A sullen expression formed on Lu Mingho's face all of a sudden as he recalled one of the reports that Yen Xiaoxi had brought out. "Oh no. At the foot of a green mountain, a Western-style courtyard had appeared out of nowhere. Next to it was the highway that led to the Forbidden Land. They directly named the city the Forbidden Land. As for the original name of the city, no one was interested in finding out. However, the highway had been temporarily closed, and the place became rather quiet. It only took less than 10 minutes to drive into the city. It was very convenient, and they did not have to endure the inconvenience of the Forbidden Land. Therefore, the Nordic ambassadors declined the reception from the administration without hesitation. They planned to be self-sufficient in this place until the day of the meeting. It was supposed to be like this. However, the day before yesterday, another delegation actually took a fancy to this place and directly dug a cave in the mountain next to it. They were a group of mystical warriors from the huge jungle in the South American continent. Originally, the two delegations of transcendence who worshipped nature lived in harmony. In the beginning, they even chatted happily and occasionally went to each other for tea. "Let's talk things out. Everyone, sit down and have a cup of tea. Let's just talk things out. There's no need to be angry." The two mediators sent by the administration were looking at the two parties with a headache. The representatives of the Nordic ambassadors were not so bad. They could easily find someone who was proficient in foreign languages. However, the group of mystical warriors from the jungle in the South American continent was really a headache for the administration. If it were not for the fact that they had an interpreter among them. Things have come to this, there's nothing to say. At this time, a man in silver armor on the side of the Nordic ambassadors shook his head and said, "The two of you from the Kelowna administration, we'll solve this matter ourselves. There's no need to trouble you. Don't worry, we've never been people who advocate violence and destruction. We're from afar, and as guests, we know our limits. We'll compensate for whatever damage is done here." Seeing that the two parties were about to fight again, the two agents from the administration suddenly had a headache. This was not the first time the two ambassadors fought. If it wasn't for this, the highway next to them wouldn't have been temporarily closed. On the day of the closure, because of the sudden incident, it was blocked for a long distance. The drone had already flown 7 or 8 kilometers, but the blocked section still hadn't cleared up. On the side of the jungle ambassadors, a woman with tattoos on her face directly stabbed the spear in her hand into the ground. She seemed to be too lazy to speak, but her actions had already made it clear. "If you want to fight, then let's fight." It was very imposing, wasn't it? The two agents who were sent to mediate were really miserable. These representatives from all over the world were not the third-rate evil demons they usually faced. If they didn't have some ability, these people probably wouldn't have crossed the ocean to come here. Once the battle started again, they would only be able to watch the battle. "They're fighting again." One of the agents sighed, then put down the black suitcase in his hand and opened it. This was not an ordinary black suitcase. This was the product of the first research institute of the administration, Master Wency. After opening the suitcase, it could be assembled into a temporary stool. It was convenient for the agents to have time to rest while keeping an eye on the target. "Well, the weather is good today." The colleague next to him had already assembled the stool. He poured a cup of goji berry and chrysanthemum tea for his colleague with the thermos flask he brought with him. "I have 2 bowls of rice here, do you want some?" "Oh, okay, I haven't had breakfast this morning." The colleague nodded and immediately said, "Hey, the weather forecast said it would rain today. No, right? What's wrong? Why is the sky suddenly covered with dark clouds?" The agent from the administration said in surprise. Although the two diplomatic missions were shouting fiercely when they were fighting, they still restrained themselves. "Why is the weather affected this time? Don't tell me he's really angry?" "Wait, it's not them, this is..." The agent holding the thermos flask suddenly fell off the stool. "This looks like..." Consultant Long. At this moment, both sides of the two warring delegations suddenly sensed something. They all stopped and looked up at the sky in unison. they saw a golden thunderbolt striking down from the sky instantly. The warriors of the mysterious side in the jungle instantly changed their expressions. A dark-skinned man with green tattoos all over his body, even his eyebrows were tattooed a few times. He hurriedly raised a wooden staff in his hand and shouted loudly. As for the Nordic diplomatic mission, there was also a girl with sharp ears, who was dressed in green. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she raised the slender sword in her hand. The 7 gems inlaid on the sword instantly burst into a dazzling light. Boom! The thunderbolt struck down. The golden thunderbolt scattered in all directions. 2 agents from the administration immediately fell to the ground with their hands covering their heads. After the thunderbolt, a huge crater dozens of meters wide appeared on the ground. In the huge crater, the wooden staff in the hand of the tattooed dark-skinned man from the mysterious side in the jungle had cracked more than half. However, there was still a small part of the staff that hadn't completely cracked. The dark-skinned man's eyes were filled with horror, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. On the side of the Nordic diplomatic mission, 3 gems on the sword of the sharp-eared girl also exploded. It seems that I haven't traveled for a long time. A majestic voice slowly sounded at this moment. Maybe it's been too long, so some people have forgotten who's in charge of this place. In the sky, the Kelowna Shinryu, who was wearing jeans, a white shirt and a white coat, stood in the air and looked down. I'm in charge. The Kelowna Shinryu raised his hand at this moment. Instantly, the dark clouds rolled back and lightning flashed. How dare you hurt the people of Kelowna? I'll kill you! Boom, boom, boom. This place had become a pool of lightning, a pool of lightning. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 5684. Chapter 1759. I'll hack you to death. Although these words were definitely in the top 5 of the administration's grassroots staff, who were responsible for maintaining the summit, they obviously couldn't say it out loud. When asked why they couldn't say it, it was for international peace. But Kelowna Shinryu didn't care about this. Don't ask why. If one asked, he'd hack 1, hack 1, hack 2, hack as many as there were. Anyway, Kelowna was full of power. The continuous sound of thunder, as if it was the end of the world, lasted for a few minutes before it finally stopped. However, it was as if one could still see the drifting electric light in the air, which made one's heart palpitate. The 2 agents from the administration were still lying on the ground. They carefully raised their heads and saw 12 charcoal-like figures lying in the deep pit in front of them. There was even one who had one hand on the edge of the pit. He was so close to climbing out of the pit. So miserable. Agent A swallowed his saliva and didn't know what to do next. This Kelowna Shinryu. Consultant Long, Lord Long probably had a good time hacking people, but someone had to deal with the aftermath. Obviously, this kind of work had always fallen on the administration. Let's go and see what this ancestor has to say. Agent B, the peacemaker, sighed. It wasn't a good idea to just lie there with his butt sticking out. Good. Hello, Consultant Long. The 2 timidly came to Kelowna Shinryu, who had just landed. Agent A greeted him and was about to say something. But Long Shirua scolded. You bastards, my people were innocently injured by this group of overseas trash. Instead of coming to arrest them, you're here soaking in chrysanthemums? You get such a high salary, don't you have a conscience? Yes. Agent B said bitterly. It's so king painful. Consultant Long is right. We'll go back and submit the self-reflection letter, then go to the headquarters to apologize. Yes. I'm so heartbroken. Seeing this, Agent A shuddered and immediately knelt on the ground, crying bitterly, It's our fault. We have let the organization down. I've let down the people. Consultant Long, scold us to your heart's content. F***CK. These 2 guys, they must have been trained before, right? As the saying goes, never slap a crying face. Kelowna Shinryu, who was amenable to coaxing but not coercion, was stunned speechless at this moment. After a long while, he subconsciously said. Are the people from the agency all so shameless now? You'll lose your job if you care about your reputation. Agent A clenched his teeth and said, Consultant Long, we have elders and children to take care of. Our whole family depends on us to feed ourselves. Let's just take it as a contribution. All right. Long Shirua sighed. Large organizations were like this. When there were too many people, it would be difficult to control them. Just like the agency, the Xianyuan Palace was also like this. When there were too many people, they would quarrel over trivial matters every day. Therefore, Long Shirua felt comfortable living alone. At this moment, in the deep pit, the dozen or so people who had been turned into charcoal got up in grief and indignation. They staggered. Although they were seriously injured, it seemed that the true dragon of Divine Land had not really killed them. Among the Nordic ambassadors, the sharp-eared girl who had lost a few gems on her sword covered her shoulder and said angrily, Dragon of Kelowna, we didn't offend you. Is this how you treat your guests as a superpower like Kelowna? The tattooed man from the jungle, who had half of his wooden staff broken, also had an angry look on his face. However, Long Shirua obviously did not understand what he was saying. Not to mention the language of this group of jungle mystics, even if it was the English of the Nordic ambassadors, Kelowna Shinryu would still pick his ears. The agency is the agency, and I am me. Long Shirua snorted coldly. I've already fought. Come and fight me if you dare. If you don't want to fight, just bear with it. Kelowna allowed you to enter this time, but when did I say that I allowed you to fight here? Also, this morning, who hurt the old fox? Come out now. If you don't kowtow and apologize to me, I'll drag you to the core of the lava layer. In the face of such a powerful true dragon of the Divine Land. After the translation, the envoys of the two diplomatic missions fell into silence. This is the Guardian of the East? How can he be so unreasonable? On the side of the Nordic ambassadors, the pointy-eared girl gritted her teeth. Her face was full of humiliation. Commander, we have to swallow this? She was looking at the man in silver armor. As the commander of the Nordic ambassadors, the man's name was Midway. In essence, he was a master demon hunter from the Nordic region. According to legend, he had a trace of the Asgard Divine Kingdom, the Asgard Divine Kingdom. He had a very good reputation among the Nordic Inhumans. As for the pointy-eared girl, her name was Liz. She was the descendant of a human and an elf. This half-elf girl was the youngest in terms of age and seniority. She represented her sick teacher, a very reputable mage in Northern Europe, to participate in this diplomatic mission. At the same time, she was also here to gain experience. When Midway heard this, he could only smile bitterly. This is considered light. Liz, you haven't experienced the age of travel of the Eastern Dragon, so you don't know how terrifying she is. Back then, the Eastern Dragons, age of travel, started from the east and fought all the way through. Then, it started from the Northern Hemisphere and fought all the way to the Southern Hemisphere. Almost all the myths and legends that you have heard of had been visited by this Eastern Dragon. Do you know the Inhuman Domain? Until now, anyone in the Inhuman Domain, who is slightly older, has not turned pale at the mention of the dragon. Does this mean that all the superhumans in the world have been suppressed? The half-elf girl couldn't help but widen her eyes. Who knows? Midway shook his head. In any case, the Eastern continent has always been a place where superhumans are forbidden to enter. Anyway, even if the legends of the Age of Travel were exaggerated by later generations, you've seen the Eastern Dragon, haven't you? Oh, Liz, I can already see your teacher's face when he learns that 3 of his gems have been destroyed. Then, there's nothing he can do about it. If you don't want the other gems to be destroyed, it's best if you don't say a word from now on. The half-elf girl wasn't a rash person. At least, she was a little younger, but she wasn't arrogant either. She was just angry that the treasures her teacher had given her before he left were destroyed. She nodded timidly, indicating that she wouldn't cause any more trouble. Then, she quickly went to stand by the side of the envoy, a plump woman who looked graceful. After calming the nerves of the envoy, Midway walked out. His injuries were a hindrance, but not to the extent that the master demon hunter didn't even have the strength to walk a few steps. Midway glanced at the man who was also walking out of the forest. The situation on the other side was similar to his own. The man's name was Shuinmius, and he was an ancient sorcerer of the jungle mystics. The huge jungle in the South American continent had always been isolated from the outside world and rarely had contact with the outside world. As for those who would walk among the world's extraordinary, even if Midway's knowledge was extraordinary, he knew very little. At first, the two sides were friendly. Midway had wanted to use this opportunity to learn more about the mysteries of the forest, but he didn't expect things to escalate into a fight between the two sides. At this moment, the mysterious sorcerer, Shuinmius, had an unconcealed anger in his eyes. Midway had no choice but to force a smile in response. Then, the two of them finally arrived in front of Shinryu in Kelowna. Long Shiruo was shaking her legs impatiently. She was sitting in the box chair that Agent A had brought over. Her arms were crossed over her chest. "Tell me, which bastard did this?" Long Shiruo said coldly. Agent A, who was standing at the side, quickly translated. After a while, the representatives from both diplomatic missions looked at the same place in confusion. Midway was the first to frown. "We didn't talk about the fox monster you mentioned. This can't be our doing." Shuinmius snorted coldly. "Forest warriors wouldn't attack nature's kin. This is a conspiracy of the Northern European barbarians." "What are they talking about?" Long Shiruo turned her head and asked. Agent A quickly stepped forward and whispered. "Miss Long, these two are arguing. They both said it wasn't them." "So you're saying that I've wronged them?" Seeing that the Kelowna Shinryu was about to raise his eyebrows, Agent A wiped his cold sweat and said, "How can that be? Miss Long, in my opinion, these two diplomatic groups must be afraid. That's why they're arguing. Why don't you leave this matter to us first, and after we get to the bottom of it?" "I have to wait until next year," Long Shiruo interrupted, looking like she was about to explode. "Why is this Lord Long so angry? Didn't a local agent say that a warrior riding a dragon had appeared? Didn't they say that women, females who had been nourished by that would more or less become gentler?" Agent A quickly glanced at Agent B. Agent B was looking up at the sky, obviously not planning to accept this challenge. He could only sigh in his heart about his carelessness in making friends. Then, he braced himself and promised, 3 days, no 2 days. 1 day at the fastest. He and I will give you a satisfactory answer. 3 minutes. Kelowna Shinryu snorted coldly. "For the sake of the old man, I'll give you 3 minutes. Get to the bottom of it." "Sir, aren't you forcing people to lock them up?" Agent A's face immediately turned sour. Kelowna Shinryu stood up. At this moment, a figure flashed and appeared beside the huge crater. The voice was already there. "Ha ha, Lord Long, why are you making things difficult for these little ones? I don't need 3 minutes. I'll give you the answer now, okay?" It was a man wearing white training clothes. His sideburns were white, but his face was rosy like a young man's. Unparalleled scholar, fire cloud evil god. Agent AB heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, there was a big boss who could speak in front of Kelowna Shinryu. As small shrimps, they could probably land safely. "Old man, are you here to smooth things over?" But this Kelowna Shinryu master was mean and sarcastic. "The agency will pay for the treatment of the injured fox demon." Fire Cloud smiled and said, "Not only that, we'll also take care of its life. Several descendants in its family who can transform have already obtained residence permit. In addition, there are still some vacancies in the provincial bureau. I think we can ask them to do some odd jobs." Shinryu Master couldn't help but frown. She really didn't want to offend these guys who were smiling apologetically. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted to quarrel with them. At this moment, she forcefully suppressed the indescribable annoyance in her heart and said coldly, "What do you want? The Nordic diplomatic group and the mysterious jungle will do me a favor. Let's leave it at that, okay?" Fire Cloud sternly said, "The summit is about to begin, and we also have some difficulties on our side. But you can rest assured that I will personally supervise this matter. After the summit is over, I will personally tie up the culprit who did it. If I can't find the culprit, I'll let you beat my old bones to vent your anger, okay? Remember what you said." Long Shirua snorted. With a flash of golden light, she flew toward the city. Then, this Shinryu master's signature golden light quickly landed on the edge of the city. She was afraid of falling. "Greetings, Consultant Fire Cloud." Agent AB suddenly became more cautious and straightened his back. Kelowna's Shinryu was difficult to deal with, but the whole agency knew that this Shinryu was tough on the outside but soft on the inside, and that he would rather suffer than lose face, so he was easier to deal with. However, Consultant Fire Cloud was someone who didn't dare to mess with. Otherwise, he wouldn't be called an old man for nothing. As the saying goes, when an old man gets angry, blood will splash 5 steps away. Those who had seen blood before were all fence-sitters. It was Agent Lu Mingho from this city who contacted me directly. Fire Cloud said expressionlessly, "You came in time." That's right, that's right." The agents hurriedly pecked at him. "This old face of mine can't be used many times. Can't you guys improve a little?" Fire Cloud Demon God sighed. "Let's not talk about other things now. Now, tell me, how did the 2 envoys get into a fight, and how did they accidentally injure that fox demon?" The 2 agents looked at each other with a troubled expression. "Still don't want to tell the truth?" Evil God snorted coldly. "No." Consultant Fire Cloud. Agent B had no choice but to say helplessly, "The truth is, until now, we still don't know why the 2 diplomatic missions started fighting. What did you say?" Fire Cloud Evil God frowned and subconsciously looked at the 2 mysterious leaders of the Northern European diplomatic group in the forest. Midway and Shuinmius both showed a hint of confusion. They didn't know what to say. A light rushed out from the calm sea surface like a feather jumping out of the water, then landed on the sea surface and walked quickly. Azra White Cheelin. Miss Maid was sitting in the back seat, holding Boss Luo in the front with both hands. She felt that this trip to the underwater city was very pleasant. "Well, I'm back." Boss Luo looked at the coastline not far ahead. The troops of the British Knights didn't seem to have completely retreated, and more than half of the beach was still closed. ######PS. As usual. End of this chapter. Chapter 1760. When 2 figures suddenly appeared in the Butterfly Society, of the old school building, Miss Cheen, who had just changed into a female worker's, servant's, uniform, also picked up a broom. It didn't take long. She was thinking about how to sweep the floor. It wasn't that she hadn't done this kind of work before. She had done it many times. After reincarnating for so many times, she started from a child until the end of her life, so how could she not know how to do housework? But this was also the time to seal her memory and reincarnate. At this time, she was the fairy of Huanjin Dao, the sword holder of the Green Lotus sword song. So when she picked up the broom, this fairy Cheen obviously hesitated. There seemed to be a voice in her heart. "You're not a human, are you? You don't need to eat, are you? You don't need to go to the toilet, are you? You don't need to sweep the floor, are you?" Then, when the voice kept sounding in her heart and Fairy Cheen looked at the broom in her hand, the shop owner and the real Miss Servant Girl came back. The kind that didn't open the door. This was very embarrassing, but Cheen Chuyu's face was as cold as a natural boundary, which perfectly covered the fluctuation in her heart at this time. Therefore, when Boss Luo and Miss Servant Girl looked at each other, this fairy silently put the broom aside, and then picked up a piece of cloth, walking into the inner room. "Well, Miss Cheen is very polite." Boss Luo smiled at this time. He had never asked this temporary guest to do anything. This was Miss Servant Girl's idea from the beginning. Miss Servant Girl said indifferently, according to Taiyinzi, the big families in ancient Kelowna would have maids who were used to do miscellaneous things. They were generally called maids. These maids who don't know how to work were locked in the woodshed and not given food. In ancient times, maids were very useful. Boss Luo shook his head, walking to the desk casually. He sat down and waved his hand. The infinitely small television screens opened up one by one. They were all scenes of what was happening in the world at the moment, although he had become more cheerful after entering the pure black force field. But the things that he liked to do before obviously did not change because of this. The sky was still the same sky, whether it was dark clouds, clear skies, or the moon and stars. Should we consider going back? Luochio suddenly said. Speaking of which, because of the Nether King incident, this seaside town with a long history had been temporarily closed. As for the school, it had entered an indefinite state of suspension. Currently, most of the world's attention was on the awakening of the transcendent. People were frightened and some were excited. The depression of the industrial society seemed to have found a way to break the dam. Then, all the public opinion poured into this topic. Miss Maid had always been very obedient. She had never disobeyed Boss Luo, so she immediately said, "In that case, I'll prepare some gifts." Gifts? Luochio was startled. Yu Yi blinked and said softly, "Yes, returning from overseas, of course, I have to bring something for my family. Probably Miss Ren will like it." She was talking about this. Boss Luo chuckled and let her be. There are still a few days before the summit meeting, it seems. Luochio suddenly looked at one of the split screens of the infinitely small television. He thought for a while and said, "Maybe we should take a look here first." I saw Lady Nan. Lady Nan. Nan Xiaonan. The visitor from the other subworld, who gave him the star creation technique, was currently working hard on how to properly develop in this unfamiliar subworld. Moreover, she was extremely missing the Almighty who lived in seclusion in this subworld and the delicacies from her hometown. After secretly taking Mr. House away from Ostong Pharmaceuticals and pretending to be a rescue team sent by the vampire who Mr. House had been secretly contacting, Nan Xiaonan went through a lot of twists and turns before running to the border of Britain by boat. The vampire who sent the rescue team was a gentleman with a knighthood living in the border of Britain. Most of his ancestral properties were in York City, Britain. So this time, their destination was York City. Originally, they planned to quietly disembark from Fog City and then take the train to their destination. But unfortunately, when they approached Fog City, they encountered Fog City that was in lockdown, Fog City was in chaos, and the effects were removed by the Magician Association's Oblivion spell. They had no choice but to change their route and disembark from another place. However, it wasn't a smooth journey. It seemed to have something to do with the increase of supernatural incidents in society. Their group were illegal immigrants who could not see the light of day, and could only hide along the way. It took them a long time before they finally arrived at Mr. Vampire's lair. It was a small town called Whitby on the outskirts of York City. The checkpoint here doesn't seem to be very relaxed. In an RV, Nan Xiaonan and Section Chief Qin, who had plastic surgery to look like Tang Tianlin, were observing the road ahead and chatting from time to time. Hearing that, Tang Tianlin nodded and said, "I saw a lot of news on the way. Some unknown changes seem to be happening in this world. They call those incredible and bizarre events transcendence, the power that surpasses mortals." Nan Xiaonan flipped her hair and put her elbow on the window. She tilted her head and looked at Tang Tianlin, who was driving. No matter what this guy's identity was before the plastic surgery, it was enough for her to know that he was Tang Tianlin now. Nan Xiaonan didn't plan to use another identity to call this section Chief Qin. She heard that he was the forensic doctor before she took office. To put it bluntly, from the point of view of those people outside, you're probably one of the transcendents. Nan Xiaonan chuckled and said, "When you're angry, you'll turn into a gray giant." Shouldn't you pay some copyright fees to a movie company? Tang Tianlin ignored her and continued to focus on driving. He didn't have enough time at the moment, mainly because the situation of Mr. House in the RV was very dangerous at the moment. Mr. House was originally critically ill. The so-called plan to transfer his consciousness to a clone was deceived by a group of scientists from the beginning. The plan obviously didn't succeed. His consciousness was still in his dying body. Therefore, Mr. House had no choice but to place his last hopes on his new collaborator, Mr. Vampire. But now, because of the long and arduous journey, Mr. House, who was already unable to bear the burden, was on the verge of death. Now, he was like a dying man, and there was no guarantee that he wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a day before he died. How could Tang Tianlin not be anxious? Mr. House had the secret of the perfect human cells in his hands. As for Mr. Vampire, he was also related to the Perfect Human Project. He was most likely one of the project's funders. Tang Tianlin, Section Chief Qin, his teacher, presided over the Perfect Human Cell Development Project. Then, he was suddenly invaded by an unknown force, and finally, the trajectory of his life underwent a major change. He had been lurking as a forensic doctor, silently waiting for an opportunity. He hoped to find out what happened at the beginning, and he was even more unwilling to see his teacher's life's efforts being used for evil purposes. Therefore, he resolutely embarked on the path of revenge. At this moment, Tang Tianlin suddenly stepped hard on the brakes, hurriedly stopping the RV. In the rear compartment of the RV, the mercenaries sent by Mr. Vampire hurriedly knocked on the window and asked in dissatisfaction. In front of the RV, there were a few black cars blocking the road. And soon, many strong men directly walked out of the black cars. They didn't seem to be the people from the special agencies in Britain who were most anxious to clean up supernatural incidents. Tang Tianlin and Nan Xiaonan looked at each other and then chose to get out of the RV. "You are?" Tang Tianlin asked with a frown while being vigilant. "Mr. Varley sent us," one of the men in black said indifferently at this time. "We're here to pick up House. Thank you for escorting us along the way. Come with us. After you see Mr. Varley, you'll get the reward you want." "Thank you." Tang Tianlin nodded at this time. Then, the few black cars led the way but took them to another road. "This doesn't seem to be the way into the town? Mr. Varley doesn't live in town. His house is outside town." "See, that's the old castle," the man in black said unhurriedly. "In addition, if you want to see Mr. Varley, you have to wait until night. You know, he hates the day. Wait, there's someone in front." At this moment, the driver in front could not help but stop the car. At this time, Nan Xiaonan, who was sitting in the RV's driver's seat, could not help but widen her eyes. Guess what she saw? She saw the delicious food of her hometown. Oh no, she saw the powerful person who could make the delicious food of her hometown, Ren Xiling's silly son. "Luoqiu, why is he here, with a woman? What's going on? Who are you?" The driver in front frowned at this time. This was the road to the old castle. Usually, no one would pass through here. In a place like private property, there were suddenly two strangers, and not one, but a young man and a young woman. Our car broke down and we couldn't find help nearby, so we had to ask for help here. "Can you take us with you? We haven't eaten for a whole day, and now we feel hungry and thirsty." As he said, the young man in front of him even raised a piece of paper in his hand, on which was written, "Help." As for lifting her skirt to show her thighs on the road, Miss Maid obviously wouldn't do that. The driver frowned at this time, but immediately saw the eyes of the person behind him, so he nodded. "Okay, get in the car." He looked at the young man and woman as if they were dead people. Although the man had delicate skin, which was very to his taste, and the woman was very beautiful. However, their fates had already been arranged. Mr. Varley would probably like these two fresh food who took the initiative to send themselves to him. "Thank you so much," Boss Luo said at this time with a grateful face, and then sat in the car arranged by them, Before getting in the car, he looked at the RV and smiled slightly. In the front of the RV, Nan Xiaonan couldn't help rubbing her forehead with a headache. She didn't know how to serve people, especially this kind of powerful person who could play with a subworld in the palm of his hand. "What's wrong with you?" Tang Tianlin couldn't help but ask curiously. Nan Xiaonan's situation was obviously a bit wrong at this time. "Nothing." Nan Xiaonan slowly sighed at this time and looked like she couldn't laugh. "I just have a hunch that maybe this operation won't be very smooth." "Be careful." Tang Tianlin nodded at this time, then looked at the young man who got on the car with a puzzled gaze. He subconsciously muttered to himself, "Why does he look so much like Captain Luo's child? No, he can't be here, it's just that they look alike." The motorcade was now slowly driving to the castle on the cliff in the distance. What made Firecloud Evil God not know whether to laugh or to be angry was that the two diplomatic missions in front of him had fought several times, but in the end they didn't know why they fought. They were all blaming the other party for making the first move. The Nordic diplomatic mission claimed that they were enjoying a pleasant breakfast that morning, and then a huge fireball fell directly blowing up most of the temporary house they had built. The envoys from the mysterious side of the forest also said that on the morning of the same day, a pair of lovers in their team suddenly heard a man's dirty voice while they were making a baby. The other party even left behind evidence that pointed to a dwarf in the envoys from Northern Europe. "I said it's impossible," Mr. Midway said in a low voice. "That morning they were all eating breakfast with me. It's impossible for them to peek. And our house was destroyed, it was something that could be seen. It was clearly you who summoned the fireball. The self-proclaimed Nordic barbarians of a higher race. You bunch of rats hiding in the jungle," curses were heard everywhere. It was unknown where this group of people who had just been seriously injured found the strength to still be full of energy at this time. Firecloud Evil God looked at them with a headache, then snorted coldly. He released his aura, and directly suppressed this group of transcendents in front of him. "Have you never thought that the reason why things are happening so strangely is because someone is deliberately provoking you to fight?" Firecloud Evil God frowned and said, "This is clearly a clumsy modus operandi. Anyone with a discerning eye can see it. The strong ones in Kelowna, we have already considered this possibility." Midway shook his head at this time and said, "But we have set up barriers all around, it's impossible for someone to pass through the barriers, steal our people's things, and even leave them as so-called evidence. Besides, even if our people really did peek, how could they leave behind something that can be used against them?" Agent A immediately translated at this time. The priest of the jungle mysterious side, Hugh Yinmius, snorted coldly and said, "Finally willing to admit your evil deeds. In order to cover up your evil deeds, you even directed and acted out the illusion that your house was destroyed, the guilty ones complaining first. Fireball? Among you, there's someone who can summon a fireball, that pointy-eared girl can." Agent A immediately translated again. "Can you not King translate at a time like this?" At this time, Firecloud Evil God directly slapped him flying. "Forget it, I won't break it. I am not an upright official. I don't care what kind of delegation you are, according to the management regulations of the Kelowna Authority. I now announce that all of you will be locked up. I will negotiate with the government behind you. It's over." The old man heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that he had handled the situation quite well. #######PS 5784. Chapter 1761. As representatives of transcendent diplomatic missions from other countries, even if they were really locked up, they could not do too badly. Firecloud Evil God was also unwilling to chat with the director of the administration because of the complaints on his desk. Therefore, the Nordic diplomatic mission and the mysterious jungle-side mission were directly invited to the best hotel in the area, Four Seasons Hotel. Here, there were special people who were responsible for guarding and providing food 24 hours a day. The transcendents of the two diplomatic missions seemed to know that they could not win, especially after being sent into the city. It was even harder for them to deal with human weapons. Therefore, they seemed to be quite cooperative. One diplomatic mission closed the first floor of the hotel, and it was peaceful for the time being. Fire Cloud Evil God was sitting in the lobby of the hotel, making kung fu tea by himself. At this time, Yen Xiaoxi, who had just received the news, hurried over. You usually seem quite steady, but your breath is in a mess. Sit down. Fire Cloud Evil God was sitting on a wooden stool, calm and composed. Master, I heard that you had a little conflict with Consultant Long? Fire Cloud said. If there is really a conflict, do you think I can still sit here alive? What kind of people do you have under you? They are so good that they don't learn to be good. Do they always like to exaggerate? I will go back and reorganize. Section Chief Yen suddenly said seriously. The rotten part is in the root. It is not something that can be cured with 1 or 2 reorganizations. Fire Cloud shook his head and suddenly said, After this meeting is over, follow me to cultivate for a while. I plan to recommend you to be the new consultant. This way you can be more relaxed when you work. Remember, you have to earn your reputation. If you want to earn your reputation, you have to rely on your fist. My reputation is earned by punches. Don't waste your talent. In ancient times, you could be considered a rare martial arts genius. I know what to do. Yen Xiaoxi nodded silently. At this time, Fire Cloud Evil God stood up and said, There are many people here, I like the quietness. Let's go to the Peace Hotel outside the city and find old Zhang's family to drink tea. This time, a junior named Lu Mingho informed me directly. This guy has guts, he should be able to use it. You do as you see fit. After all, he is the local tyrant. You old masters from the capital, would you know better than him where the soy sauce is cheaper? Yen Xiaoxi hurriedly stood up to send him off. However, she suddenly asked, Master, now that there are so many transcendents in the world, what kind of attitude should we adopt? What attitude do you want? The evil god of Fire Cloud suddenly patted his overly serious disciple on the head. You know what kind of attitude you want, you just don't dare to. Go ahead and do it. If anything happens, I'll take care of it for you. If it doesn't work, I'll shamelessly accompany you to visit each house. After all, Lord Long has already done this, more than once. Remember, this is our territory. We are martial artists, not politicians. When it's time to be courageous, we'll do it directly. I know what to do. Oh right. The evil god of Fire Cloud suddenly remembered something. Keep an eye on the Nordic ambassadors and the jungle mystic. Otherwise, my old bones won't be able to withstand a beating from that old lady. You're my apprentice. You have to help me when I'm in trouble, don't you think? So, whether or not Master is reliable, and whether or not he can take care of things is a problem. Section Chief Yen sighed inwardly. That was why he usually did not put too much effort into training. What was the point of training? He knew that he would never be the best at it. At this moment, Yen Xiaoxi received a call. It was a call from the headquarters in the capital, so she had to treat it seriously. Then, Section Chief Yan's expression changed slightly. What happened? The evil god of Fire Cloud sensed that something was wrong and asked directly. Nothing. The delegation from the Ascetic Association has arrived. They asked me to receive them, Yen Xiaoxi said after thinking for a while. It's Bai Jie, right? The evil god of Fire Cloud nodded. It should be him. In the past, Lai Kaixing was basically the one who took care of the association. As the president, he had a lot of free time. Now, he's probably very busy. Oh, if it's Bai Jie, you should have this expression, right? Yen Xiaoxi nodded. This time, the delegation also has a new secretary of the association. Song Haoran. Song Haoran? The evil god of Fire Cloud frowned. This name sounds familiar. Right, the lucky guy who saved most of the elite Taoist demons at Mount Tai? How did he become the secretary of the association? Yen Xiaoxi said, I don't know. But during this time, this song guy has been helping the reconstruction of the Mount Tai area regardless of the cost. Moreover, because of his kindness and his relationship with the various Taoist sects and demons, he seems to be developing well. According to the information, the Song Haoran was originally a powerful family in the country, but they moved dozens of years ago and finally settled down in the mainland of South America. They have done a lot of business in the secular world. This time, they seem to have the intention to return. This Song Haoran is probably just a stepping stone. Then let's go and meet him. The evil god of fire Cloud thought for a while and said, I also want to meet this young man who rose up like a shooting star. I want to see if he's a talent. He saved so many Taoists and demons by himself. This guy's luck is really extraordinary. This is a great benefit. It's hard to say about the demons, but these guys from the Taoist sects are most afraid of karma. They'll settle their debts even if they have to risk their lives. Then I'll make the arrangements. Yen Xiaoxi nodded and left before the evil god of Fire Cloud. The ancient castle was to the north of the town. After passing through a dense forest, they could see a road leading to the cliff. The ancient castle of their destination this time was halfway up the cliff. To be exact, the time of their arrival was just past noon or just before 13 in the afternoon. Along the way, the people sent by the ancient castle to receive Tang Tianlin did not say much. It was not until they entered the ancient castle that they started to move again. Mr. House was taken away by a man who was wearing a doctor's uniform and looked like a family doctor. He was sent for treatment. As for the mercenaries who were sent on this mission, they were arranged to stay in a room in the ancient castle. After that, no one else entered this room. The people in the mercenary group knew that Tang Tianlin and Nan Xiaonan were impersonators, but because they had been infected with some kind of terrifying virus and were threatened, they could only cooperate along the way. Tang Tianlin had already been on the way. From a few mercenaries in the mercenary group, he had a brief understanding of the owner of the ancient castle, Wali Tsimish, a vampire who had lived for an unknown period of time. He had many secret properties all over the world, but he had always been living in Whitby Town. He was not afraid of cannons and had the terrifying ability to travel freely in the night. He had the terrifying ability of immortality. For this group of mercenaries who could only be regarded as elites among ordinary people, as long as he showed a little of his common extraordinary power, it was enough to make them fearful. Perhaps they could not even resist simple mental suggestion. This was Nan Xiaonan's judgment. In fact, through these mercenaries, besides knowing Wali's name and that he was a real vampire, Tang Tianlin could not get any more useful information. We've only seen Mr. Wali once. The head of the mercenary group shook his head at this time and said, The one who usually contacts us the most is the butler of the ancient castle. He's basically in charge of big and small affairs. Remember, we only agreed to cooperate with you because we had no choice. But if you do anything to anger the owner of the ancient castle, then forgive us for not continuing this role-playing game with you. I'd rather be poisoned by your poison than be sent to the basement of the ancient castle to feed those terrible monsters. What's under the ancient castle? Nan Xiaonan suddenly became interested and asked in a good mood. I don't know what it is. At this time, a flash of fear flashed in the eyes of the head of the mercenary group. It's better not to know what it is. You'd better be quiet. In fact, ever since they entered the castle, the emotions of these mercenaries had been rather unstable. They looked frightened, and there were a few times when they almost gave themselves away. In response to this situation, Nan Xiaonan directly and quietly gave each of the mercenaries a mental shock, making them faint directly. Just say that they've been holding back for a long time, so they're drunk and can't wake up? Nan Xiaonan looked directly at Tang Tianlin at this time. You should at least sprinkle some liquor on them? Tang Tianlin could not help but shake his head, but he was not too surprised by Nan Xiaonan's means. Along the way, He had already seen similar means many times and had long been used to it. Tang Tianlin had already guessed the source of Nan Xiaonan's extraordinary power. He guessed that Nan Xiaonan had probably mutated because of the experiment back then. This mutation had even caused her personality to change, and she had forgotten the things of the past. But whether this guess was reasonable or not, Tang Tianlin could not verify it in a short time. Originally, just like how a little perfect human cell was implanted in the arm, which eventually caused the body to mutate into an invulnerable gray man with infinite strength, this in itself was already unreasonable. Now, after throwing the group of mercenaries into the inner room and sprinkling some liquor carelessly, Nan Xiaonan came out clapping her hands and asked, "House was taken away by their people." Tang Tianlin thought for a while and said, "To get to the core of the matter, we have to get close to the important people. How much of the way in have you memorized?" "I've remembered all of them." Nan Xiaonan smiled faintly and said, "Even more than you can imagine." Tang Tianlin couldn't help but cast a puzzled glance at Nan Xiaonan, only to see her mysteriously shrink at this time, and in the center of her palm there was unexpectedly an extra small stone. This stone seemed to have moved faintly. In another room, a young man with deep dark circles, a pale face, and wearing a tuxedo, who looked about 24 or 25 years old, appeared in front of the two lost travelers whose car had broken down with two maids of the castle. It's rare to see this kind of old beetle car. At this time, the castle butler who called himself Lisa looked indifferent, and his voice was flat as he said weakly, "Don't worry, we have found the car that broke down, and someone will fix it soon. You two can stay here temporarily for the time being. If possible, we hope to thank the owner of the castle face to face and express our gratitude," Boss Luo said quite formally at this time. "Master is resting," Lisa said lightly at this time. "He likes to wake up at night. But don't worry, you two will see him. I have asked someone to prepare some food for you, and also a change of clothes, they are all new." "That's true, I can't thank you enough," Boss Luo said with a smile. "There is a bell in front of the door," Lisa said again. "If you need anything, just ring this bell, and the servants will come soon." Boss Luo said curiously, "What a strange way. Along the way, except for cars, I don't seem to see anything like electrical appliances." As they walked along the corridor, they saw many candlesticks hanging on the walls. This castle looked very old. As they walked into the castle, they felt as though they had walked into the era of this castle. "Master doesn't like modern things very much," Lisa said lightly at this time. "He thinks these things are a kind of destruction to nature, so he has always insisted on this ancient way. In fact, it's good to get used to it. If you two feel stuffy in the room, you can take a walk in the courtyard. But remember, don't cross the rose wall in the courtyard, or you will have to bear the consequences." Rose wall. Boss Luo looked out of the window at this time. From this angle, he could see a corner of the so-called rose wall in the courtyard. Is there something inside? Is it something that eats people? "There will be flowers that eat people," Lisa said seriously at this time, but immediately changed his expression. "Of course this is just a joke, but Master cherishes this rose wall very much, so he doesn't want it to be destroyed by others. So, I wish you two a pleasant meal." The butler then left with the maid very elegantly. Of course, the dining car and food were left. Miss Maid directly began to lift the lid of the dining car and took a look. The food was unexpectedly rich, and the taste was not bad. "Oh, it seems that the chef of the castle is very attentive." Miss Maid smiled softly and said, "The technique is not bad. It seems that he has put in a lot of effort in entertaining guests." Miss Maid suddenly waved her hand, and a black flame sprinkled. After a while, the food on the dining car was burned up. In the end, what remained on the plate were some small charred corpses, insects, poisonous scorpions, and spiders. It was very nutritious. Hashtag 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 PS. As usual. Chapter 1762. It was indeed very nutritious. In the words of Miss Maid, these things could effectively strengthen people's physique after being cooked, especially the hematopoietic function, which could be improved to different degrees according to different people's physique. Boss Luo naturally wouldn't question Miss Maid's judgment. The witch named Pansy had a large number of believers in the secret medicine field in the inhuman domain. It had even evolved to the extent that as long as this witch published the prescription, some secret pharmacists would unconditionally overturn their past experience. In short, in fact, the food on this table was really nutritious. Although it was nutritious, Boss Luo, who had always been interested in food, lost his appetite in an instant when looking at the restored species. There were so many delicious foods in the world. It was not worthwhile to hunt for these strange things like spiders and bats. At this time, Miss Maid, who could understand the master's intention, saw this and directly put away the food on the plate. There seems to be a secret pharmacist in this castle. I can smell the secret passage of the secret medicine, especially on Butler Lisa. What are you going to do? Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously. At this time, Miss Maid was putting all the collected food into a silver cup, and then began to mash it with a silver fork. There seemed to be several kinds of useful materials in the garden outside. Miss Maid smiled at this time. I haven't made secret medicine for some time, so I'm going to make something small. In fact, it was just a pastime to pass the time. Boss Luo expressed some reserved curiosity, and then proposed to take a walk outside. Butler Lisa allowed them to freely visit the courtyard, didn't he? Miss Maid had to go outside to pick herbs to make small things, didn't she? Then, a small stone suddenly hit the window of the room at this time, making a sound, which attracted the attention of Boss Luo and Miss Maid. They looked outside and saw Nan Xiaonan's head hanging from the window. She even waved her hand and said hello. It was not cute. It's really you, Mr. Luo. Nan Xiaonan sat down excitedly. It's been a while since we last met. What an exciting and surprising reunion. She was mainly concerned that the champion could make the delicacies of her hometown, because she had always been suppressed by the will of a minor world. The champion of another minor world could only extract energy through eating. Yeah, it's been a while. Boss Luo smiled. Lady Nan seems to have lost some weight. Can you reduce it? Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but think helplessly. In order to ensure safety on the road, she had been sparing no effort to create Xing Creations creatures. What Tang Tianlin didn't know was that although there were many obstacles along the way, it was the result of Nan Xiaonan secretly being a scout. By the way, Mr. Luo, why are you here? Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said, During this period, I occasionally email Mizren. You seem to be studying abroad? I came to Britain in the first place, Boss Luo said casually. It just so happens that the school is temporarily on holiday for some reason, so I plan to go out for a road trip. I didn't expect to get lost here. Like hell, I believe you. A powerful person like you would be lost. Is it possible that you regard this place as a crack between dimensions? It wasn't easy for her and Tang Tianlin to send Mr. House here, but this Mr. Luo appeared out of nowhere. Could it be that he was also here for the perfect person? At this time, Miss Maid was bringing some drinks. There were tools to make tea in the room. Lady Nan, please have some tea. As she spoke, the servant girl brought a teacup and placed a small bag of white powder in front of Nan Xiaonan. Nan Xiaonan glanced at it and said without thinking, Can you put 2 more bags of sugar? My body's need for sugar is higher. Of course. Miss Maid smiled slightly, and then put 2 more bags of what looked like powdered sugar without hesitation. After all, this is an exciting and surprising reunion. This thing seems to be one of those nutritious things that she had just crushed? Boss Luo glanced at it. He didn't intend to point it out, but said as if nothing had happened, Lady Nan, you just happened to come here. I don't know why. After thinking about it for a while, Nan Xiaonan didn't plan to hide it. This was the first time she had met a mysterious expert that she couldn't sense after wandering in so many subworlds and wandering in so many mysterious places between the dimensions. Nan Xiaonan even felt that she didn't have to have any conflicts with him for the so-called perfect person and perfect person cells. If she wanted to survive in this subworld, the first thing she had to do was obviously to have a good relationship with the strongest person here, and also to take advantage of the luck of Ren Xiling, the child of the world, from time to time. Everything was okay. So, Lady Nan started to talk about how she stayed at home and encountered an assassination. She was thirsty, so she took a sip of Miss Maid's black tea. Needless to say, after drinking this tea, it was as if he had an inexhaustible amount of energy. She subconsciously licked her lips and wanted to refill the cup. In the corridor of the west courtyard of the castle, Tang Tianlin was walking fast like a cat. This was a route that was different from the one he took when he entered the castle. He had explored here so far. He didn't know how Nan Xiaonan was doing. After leaving the room, the two of them split up and began to make inquiries. This was Nan Xiaonan's request, and after a moment of hesitation, Tang Tianlin agreed. At this time, he was writing down the path he took while thinking about the castle. He didn't even meet anyone along the way, not even the servants of the castle, not to mention the bodyguards in black who came to receive Mr. House. The whole castle revealed a strange tranquility. It was like half of a school building on a weekend. It gave people a feeling that they could walk freely without being careful. However, this castle didn't have any modern equipment, which made Tang Tianlin feel a lot more convenient. At least he didn't have to deliberately avoid the surveillance cameras. But he didn't find anything special after searching the whole West Wing. It seemed that the whole West Wing was used to receive guests, and the East Wing was the real important place of the castle. There were only two ways to enter the East Wing. One was through the normal corridor, and the other was through the courtyard. There was a huge wall of roses in the courtyard. It was too obvious to go straight through the corridor. Once exposed, it would be difficult to maneuver around. So Tang Tianlin directly chose to go toward the wall of roses in the courtyard. The wall of roses covered nearly half of the courtyard, but when he walked in, he found that it was bigger than he imagined. At this time, the 3-meter-high wall of roses was actually a maze-like structure. Tang Tianlin walked, and found that he seemed to be a little lost. It was even difficult to distinguish the direction. This made him have the idea to directly go through the wall of roses and pretend to walk all the way. He did as he thought. At this time, Tang Tianlin took a deep breath, and then pinched the sleeve of his left arm. His arm turned gray little by little, and then it began to harden. The hardening spread all the way to his right arm. In this way, with both hands in front of his body, Tang Tianlin took 2 steps back, and then ran a few steps, and instantly crashed into the wall of roses. The moment he went through, he felt a slight pain of his skin being pierced by the barbs on the branches. Then, he successfully broke through a wall of roses and appeared on the other side. It was effective. Before Tang Tianlin broke through several walls of roses in a row, suddenly something directly hit him in the face. He was subconsciously shocked and waved his hands to block it. Unexpectedly, at this time, his legs had been directly entangled by something. Then, he only felt that his legs began to lift off the ground, and then instantly flew toward the sky. Then, he was forcefully pulled down and directly smashed on the ground. Even though the ground was covered in mud and grass, Tang Tianlin felt that this smash wasn't. If it wasn't for the fact that his body was much stronger than an ordinary person's due to his perfect human cells, such a simple smash would probably have ruptured the internal organs of an ordinary person. In his shock, Tang Tianlin finally got a clear look at the thing that attacked him. It turned out to be a quite old willow. Unlike ordinary willow trees, this guy's branches could be waved freely. His calf was now entangled by a willow tree's branches. Seeing this strange willow waving its branches again to lift him up, Tang Tianlin was shocked. His arms instantly swelled a little, and then he clenched his teeth and used his strength to directly tear off the willow tree's branches. Only then was he able to get away. He quickly retreated until he was at the position of the wall of roses. The length of the branches of the hitting willow was limited. At this time, the roots and branches had been stretched straight, but in the end, they were still an arm's length away from reaching Tang Tianlin's body. The angry hitting willow kept slapping its branches. Tang Tianlin watched in a cold sweat. At this time, he found that there were many similar willow trees here. This was a small willow forest surrounded by a maze of flowers. The willow trees that beat people only made Tang Tianlin feel fear. However, what truly made his hair stand on end was that he discovered that on the branches of the willow trees in this small willow forest, there were actually many corpses hanging from them. There was no doubt that they were corpses. As a professional forensic doctor, he often dealt with corpses. How could he be wrong about this kind of thing? And, because of his profession, Tang Tianlin could easily distinguish the approximate time of death of some corpses. Some probably died a few days ago, and some probably died a few weeks ago. Their corpses were already rotten and full of white worms, exposed in the wild like this. Who knew how many flies were attracted to lay eggs? At this time, an ear-piercing sound, like the sound of a whistle, was heard. Tang Tianlin was shocked and quickly hid in the flower wall. At this time, at the entrance of the flower wall, he saw a hunchback old man wearing an old leather wallet, with a gray beard, one black eye and the other white eye, and a face full of abscesses, limping in. At this time, he was holding a whistle in his mouth. As he walked, he blew, but it was enough to make the hitting willow trees around him stop one after another. Tang Tianlin, who was hiding in the flower wall, opened his eyes wide at this time. He saw that the ugly old man was dragging a corpse at this time. The corpse was obviously a young woman, but at this time, her skin was pale. Because she was being dragged on the ground, it was impossible to see the woman's face clearly. He only knew that she was wearing a sexy red pajama. After a while, the old man walked to a willow tree and directly hung the female corpse with a rope. Then the old man said in a rather irritable voice, "Eat, eat, you monsters! Don't disturb my nap all day, be quiet for me." He kept saying similar words, and then kept blowing the ear-piercing whistle. Then, he laughed and took out a dagger that he kept with him, and randomly cut dozens of times on the trunk of a willow tree. Only then did the hunchbacked, ugly old man stop. He gasped for breath and stared. After a while, the ugly old man suddenly began to look around suspiciously. Tang Tianlin, who was hiding in the flower wall, directly stopped breathing and did not move. After a while, the old man shook his head, and then limped away from the way he came. Until now, Tang Tianlin slowly breathed a sigh of relief. He subconsciously sat down in the flower wall, alarmed by the scene he had just seen. At this time, his palm seemed to have touched something in the soil, and he subconsciously looked at it. At this time, a cold air directly spread to his scalp, making his scalp numb. That was because he actually saw a face in the mud. The face was rotten. It seemed to be a man's face. The face and mouth were stuffed with soil, and the eyes were directly empty. The roots of the roses that were woven into the flower wall were surprisingly from the soil of the mouth, nostrils, and eyes of this face. Fertilizer. This flower wall maze, and even the willow forest in the maze. Under the soil there were corpses. In an instant, Tang Tianlin gave up the idea of going through the flower wall. He hurriedly rushed out and then went all the way back, until he was in the room where they were arranged. The mercenaries still did not wake up, and there was no trace of anyone entering the room. Before they went out, the hair that they put in the crack of the door was still there. But Nan Xiaonan still had not returned at this time. Tang Tianlin quickly poured himself a glass of wine, and directly drank a mouthful. He felt as if the whole castle had become as dark and strange as it had become. ########PS 5884. Chapter 1763. Basically, that's the general experience. Nan Xiaonan finally sighed slowly and ended her narration. Basically, there was nothing to hide. The degree of frankness could be said to be the truth. Well, it seems that Lady Nan has indeed experienced a lot along the way. Boss Luo nodded at this time and immediately said, Lady Nan, it's better not to consume too much sugar. Nan Xiaonan was subconsciously startled. She seemed to have unknowingly drunk 6 or 7 cups of delicious black tea. She put down the teacup in her hand and then nodded thoughtfully. You're right, I think I should also consume more protein, which is good for the balance of energy. It's better to consume protein in a liquid state, so that it's easier to absorb. Lady Nan, since you came out to explore the castle, you've been out for so long, aren't you worried about your companions? Miss Maid suddenly said. It's not a big problem, I've been watching. Nan Xiaonan smiled confidently at this time and said, although it's a bit suppressed here, some small tricks can still be used. I've almost explored the general terrain of the castle. As she said, there were suddenly some rustling sounds coming from the window. At this time, small stones like ants were actually lined up into a long line, moving little by little. They finally came to Nan Xiaonan, then piled up little by little, and finally combined into the shape of a small dog. It could even wag its tail. Boss Luo couldn't help but praise at this time, star creation, no matter how many times I've seen it, I can feel its wonders. Yes. Nan Xiaonan smiled at this time and said, for me, these guys are like my children. When I'm with them, it's quite a wonderful feeling. She could give a new life to an object. No matter what it was, this ability was actually quite terrifying when thinking about it carefully. It was equivalent to letting all the secrets be exposed in front of Nan Xiaonan. After all the activities of living creatures were inseparable from matter. When doing bad things, there would always be something beside. Even if it was just a grain of sand, it was enough to be a witness. So, Lady Nan has already known the secret of this castle? Miss Maid asked. Nan Xiaonan shook her head at this time and said, nothing particularly important. The real core of the castle should be inside the east wing. There are many barriers similar to bounded domain that prevent people from entering, unless we can get the object inside. Otherwise, the preliminary investigation can only stop here. As she said this, Nan Xiaonan took out a pen and paper and began to draw the topographic map of the castle, and also marked the situation she discovered. It's more or less. At this moment, Nan Xiaonan spun her pen. These places are slightly dangerous, but the other places are basically safe. In addition, the names and locations of the people in the ancient castle. As she said this, Nan Xiaonan suddenly pressed her hands on the temporarily drawn map. After a while, the map even came to life. It could be seen that the marks marked with people's names could move automatically on the map at this time. This is the track map of the activities of the people in the castle. Nan Xiaonan opened the map at this time. How is it? It's very convenient, right? Indeed. Miss Maid, who had always been picky, couldn't help but nod at this time. Just as Master said, star creation is really a kind of amazing ability. It seems to have many more uses than we imagined. Xing Chuang was Nan Xiaonan's special ability. At this time, she was somewhat proud to be praised. Mr. Luo, I'll leave this map here. Nan Xiaonan took the initiative to say at this time, take it as a reward for today's hospitality. Tang Tianlin has returned to his room. If there is nothing else, then I'll go back first. Keep in touch. After saying this, without waiting for Luochio's response, Lady Nan quickly jumped out of the window. Boss Luo and Miss Maid looked at each other. She didn't ask us why we came here. Luochio shook his head at this time. Miss Maid also said, she didn't ask us anything about the perfect person. She even gave us something. This Lady Nan seems to be the type who knows how to deal with people. Boss Luo smiled and said, this map is very interesting. Looking at the names of the servants in the castle marked on the map. Even Butler Lisa was among them, but the owner of the castle, Mr. Varley, and house were not there. At this time, butler Lisa suddenly stopped and walked into a room. The room was now written, Dr. Gore's room. Dr. Gore's was naturally the family doctor of the castle who took Mr. House away at the beginning. It was exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Mr. Lisa, the butler with dark circles under his eyes and bloodshot eyes, pushed open the door to the room of the family doctor, Girls. 2 maids stood outside the door at this time, like statues. Butler Lisa casually glanced inside the room. It was more like Mr. Gore's laboratory than a place to rest. Biological specimens soaked in preservative liquid could be seen everywhere, and the operating table placed in the center of the room. In addition, there was a strong light. This doctor was obviously special, and the only one in the castle who had many modern tools in his room. When butler Lisa came in, Dr. Gore's was dissecting something on the operating table with a chainsaw. "Can you be gentler?" Butler Lisa said at this time. "Do you know it takes a long time to clean your room every day and the smell is very strong." "Oh, you're here." Dr. Gore's put down the chainsaw at this time, just in time. While speaking, Dr. Gore's, who was quite handsome and even a little feminine, with light pinkish-purple lips, smiled, took off the blood-stained gloves, and then took out a heart from the biological body on the operating table. It was a heart that was still active and could be stirred. It's just a feed that's no longer blood-producing function, but the heart is still fine. It can be taken as breakfast. Shall I squeeze some for you? I'm not hungry. The butler shook his head. I'm here to ask you about House. He's injected, he won't die now. Dr. Gore's began to mix his so-called breakfast while saying, "Don't worry, when Mr. Varley wakes up, he'll see a lively House ghoul." "No, you may have to hide House temporarily," butler Lisa suddenly said at this time. Dr. Gore's stopped and frowned. "Why?" "I just received the news that there will be guests in the castle tonight." Butler Lisa paused and added, "It's the guys from the monitoring team." "That group of guys?" Dr. Gore's thought for a while and said, "I remember that the monitoring team doesn't have much power now. Since the news of the death of the Grand Dukes came, now all the clans in the inhuman domain have fallen into a whirlpool of struggle. Who will be afraid of the monitoring team?" "That's exactly why," butler Lisa said expressionlessly. "They need more support. The Grand Dukes died mysteriously, and the clans are not only in constant internal strife, but also more in fear. To change this situation, the monitoring team needs to regain full control of the situation. If they wanted to regain power, they needed enough support. Mr. Varley is one of the legitimate heirs of Tsimus. It's very useful for the monitoring team to win his support. That will depend on the sincerity of tonight's guests." Dr. Gore shook his head at this time, "But as far as I know, the most powerful person who can integrate the clan seems to be the young master of Torrido, Obeligan, right?" "Oh no, it should be the new master of Torrido now, Grand Duke Baligan. The situation of Torrido is different." Butler Lisa shook his head and said, "Baelgan's ability to unify the clans is much stronger than the original heirs of the other clans. He is the strongest, and he is the hero of the war 100 years ago. After the death of Torrido's Grand Duke, there was no resistance at all, and he has already succeeded to the position of Grand Duke." "Okay." Dr. Gore shook his head and said, "What's the use of you asking me to care about the internal power struggle of these clans? Compared to this, I'm more concerned about when the farm in the inhuman territory will be restored. To be honest, the rare blood types that can be found in the modern world are getting less and less, and more or less, they are all contaminated. Oh, by the way, I heard that 2 people who got lost came today? I arranged for them to stay in the West Wing." Butler Lisa said indifferently, "It just so happens that the monitoring team is coming tonight. I was wondering if I should use them to greet the guest." "So you actually came here to get the purification potion, right?" Dr. Gore's narrowed his eyes with a smile. Butler Lisa shrugged and said, who asked you to be the high-level pharmacist certified by the Magician Association. The blood of these ordinary people is not purified, and it's not easy to eat. Take it. Dr. Gores took out a bottle of potion from the cabinet. Don't be so extravagant. The raw materials are a bit scarce recently. You also know how picky our Mr. Varley is. These potions are barely enough for him. Soon, the butler who got what he wanted from Dr. Gores brought the two maids to the west wing of the castle again. He directly went to the room where the two passengers whose car broke down were greeted. The maid knocked on the door and then pushed it open. Looking at the empty room, Butler Lisa couldn't help but frown. Where are they? The room was obviously not big, and one could see if there was anyone inside at a glance. At this moment, a low voice came from outside the room. It was a relief sculpture of a human face on the wall facing the door. At this moment, it suddenly opened its eyes and spoke. They said they wanted to take a walk in the courtyard. Didn't you say that when they feel bored, they can be allowed to take a walk in the courtyard, Mr. Butler? Butler Lisa furrowed his brows and looked at the two maids in confusion. Did I really say that to them? The two maids nodded at the same time, and then looked at Butler Lisa helplessly. The butler was actually very good in all aspects, but he still walked in a decadent style. It was a pity that his memory was bad, really bad. Oh, I seem to have said that. Butler Lisa nodded at this time and then thought for a moment, then go and catch them. With that, the two maids nodded and left the room in a neat manner. The housekeeper was waiting alone in the reception room. After a while, the housekeeper stood up and looked around in confusion. Then, as if he had remembered something, he quickly left. After a while, the butler came to Dr. Gore's room again. Why are you here again? I'm going to take some potions to use tonight. Butler Lisa thought at this time and said, there will be guests from the Lesenburg family visiting tonight, so I need to prepare a banquet. Wait, didn't you just say that someone from the inspection team came to visit tonight, so you took a bottle of potion from me? When did I come here? Butler Lisa shook his head. The inspection team will come, but not today. Today's guests are from the Lesenburg family. Dr. Gores said angrily at this time, I know. You always use your bad memory as an excuse, but in fact, you just want to cheat the potions from me. I was wondering why the potions were used up so quickly. In fact, it was you who squandered them. Get lost. Bang. The door of the doctor's room was suddenly closed. What am I doing here? The butler looked at the closed door and was startled. He stood silently in front of the door and seemed to be thinking about something. Oh, I'm going to see those mercenaries. As he muttered to himself, the butler looked around him and realized that the maids were no longer by his side. The butler couldn't help but frown. He felt that the maids in the castle had become more and more lazy recently. It's outrageous. It seems that I need to adjust their food supply. The butler walked towards the room where the mercenaries were arranged. The passenger plane slowly landed on the runway. After a short period of taxiing, it would officially stop. At this time, in the cabin of the plane, the broadcast sounded. It was the broadcast of the crew that could often be heard. Well, we've finally arrived. A middle-aged Taoist priest with a bun on his head and wearing a Taoist robe yawned out of boredom and stood up. Little song, don't arrange for a plane next time. It's so uncomfortable to sit. I think we should take the train when we travel in the future. Okay, I'll arrange it next time. A handsome young man who was completely different from the other passengers in the cabin smiled and replied, I'll arrange a stewardess for one-on-one service next time. Then, the Taoist priest snorted twice and gave the young man a thumbs up. At this time, the young man's phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and narrowed his eyes, saying with a smirk, Xiao Yingying, did you miss your uncle? At this time, a special car could be seen outside, driving into the tarmac and stopping next to the passenger plane. At this time, the people who got out of the car were Consultant Hui Yun and Yen Xiaoxi of the administration. ########. Chapter 1764. It was a plane chartered by the Tao Sect Association. Hence, the people who alighted from the plane were all reputable figures in Kelowna Tao Sect, many of whom had already shown their faces during the Battle of Mount Tai. Other than the fact that Song Howren had a completely different style, he was dressed in a casual white suit and had an unruly smile on his face. Other than his good looks, there didn't seem to be anything special about him. That was Yen Xiaoxi's first impression of Song Howren. Hey, this kid's skills are not weak. Consultant Hui Yun was watching the people from the Tao Sect alight from the plane. When he saw Song Howren, his eyes suddenly lit up. That's strange, isn't this kid the secretary of the Tao Sect Association? Why is he following our path? Our path is naturally the path of a martial artist. Yen Xiaoxi's eyes lit up. Song Howren was actually proficient in martial arts, but he couldn't tell at first glance. Who's the person beside this kid? Consultant Hui Yun suddenly asked again. It was a woman dressed in casual clothes, but her face was covered with a white veil. She looked rather strange. At this moment, the woman followed behind Song Howren and alighted from the plane. It's not mentioned in the information. Yen Xiaoxi shook his head and said, Maybe it's the people from the association. I heard that the Tao Sect Association has recruited many people. After the Battle of Mount Tai and the recovery of spiritual energy, many sects have plans to expand their recruitment. This association has also become more active. A few of the masterminds of the 100 Tribulations are not here. Consultant Hui Yun frowned. What's the matter? I don't know either. Yen Xiaoxi shook his head. After alighting from the plane, Song Howren walked straight towards Consultant Hui Yun and Yen Xiaoxi. There was a warm smile on his face. Before Song Howren arrived, his voice was already heard. I think the two of you must be Senior Hui Yun from the administration and the young and promising section Chief Yen. I'm Song Howren, nice to meet you. Seeing Song Howren greet him with cupped fists, Consultant Hui Yun nodded slightly. Yen Xiaoxi, on the other hand, did not feel it was appropriate to be too cold. Instead, she reached out to shake his hand. Why don't I see Taoist priest Baijie and the other vice presidents of the association? Yen Xiaoxi asked straightforwardly. Song Howren said, The president and the deputy presidents changed their schedules at the last minute. They said that they would come over later. Therefore, they asked me to serve the other seniors of the Tao sect for the time being. Yen Xiaoxi asked with a frown, a last-minute change in the itinerary? Why didn't the administrative bureau receive any notice? It was a last-minute decision. Song Howren smiled and said, There is no signal on the plane, so I can't inform you. I'm really sorry. There was no signal on the plane. It would be a miracle if they believed it. Yen Xiaoxi glanced at Hui Yun, who shook his head gently. At the same time, a group of seniors of the Tao sect came forward. They recognized Hui Yun, who was in charge of guarding the administration of China, and they also knew his background. At this time, they had come forward to befriend him. Just like that, Consultant Hui Yun suddenly fell into a social hell. He was so regretful that his intestines turned green. If he had known that Baijie Daoist would not be on the flight this time, he would have kicked Yen Xiaoxi alone and gone to the Peace Hotel to drink with old Zhang's family. It was hard for Hui Yun to say whether people should be divided into different levels, but there was definitely a division among the transcendent. Transcendents of different levels would not be able to talk to each other. In that case, let's wait for them to arrive. Yen Xiaoxi had no choice but to say, The administrative bureau has already arranged a place for you to stay. Let me send you there. From now on, we will be in charge of the reception from the start of the meeting until it starts. You're welcome, Section Chief Yen. Song Howren suddenly waved his hand and said, I've already arranged a place for you to stay. There's no need to trouble the administrative bureau. You've already arranged it? Yen Xiaoxi frowned. Song Howren laughed heartily and said, That's right. It's our Song family's property. The expenses of the Tao Sect Association will be sponsored by our Song family. Take it as a contribution to the country and not a waste of the country's finances. The situation involved in this meeting is very complicated. Yan Xiaoxi said expressionlessly, "We hope that everyone will follow the rules. We won't make things difficult for you." Song Haoran smiled and said, "Section Chief Yan can send someone over to take care of it. I'll take good care of it. Even if Section Chief Yan comes over personally, it won't be a problem. Section Chief Yan, don't worry. The Dao Sect Association is an official department and has an official seal. There's nothing to worry about, unless Section Chief Yan thinks that we'll do something bad." "I'll send someone over," Yan Xiaoxi said calmly. "Thank you for your accommodation." Song Haoran smiled and said, "Then, let's go now." A fleet of luxury cars drove toward the airport. They were lined up in a row and looked very imposing, attracting the attention of most of the passengers who had just gotten off the plane. "This is also your arrangement?" Yan Xiaoxi frowned. "I just want to make it more comfortable for the seniors." Song Haoran laughed and said, "After all, I've just become the secretary of the Dao Sect Association. It's not good for me to mess up my work. Section Chief Yan, please understand, please understand." Yan Xiaoxi remained silent and subconsciously looked at the chartered bus that he had sent over to pick up the seniors of the Dao Sect, the tour bus. He suddenly felt the evil intentions of the power of money. Even if the Administrative Bureau was a special organization, its funds were limited. The funds were all used on research and equipment changes. How could they be so extravagant and greedy for pleasure? He felt that the people of the Dao Sect had really changed. They actually succumbed to sugar-coated bullet. "Everyone here is an expert senior of the Dao Sect," Yan Xiaoxi said calmly. "I think they won't be moved by material things. Secretary Song, you'd better spend more time and effort on useful things." As she said that, the doors of the fleet of luxury cars opened one after another. All of a sudden, graceful ladies in short skirts walked out of the cars. They stood in front of the car and bowed to the group of experts in the Dao Sect in unison, inviting them to board the car. Seriously, this little Song, I can't believe he actually made such arrangements. I must criticize him properly. I'll get on this car. Young lady, let me tell you the principles of life. Your clothes can't be like this. Who can bear this? Cough, cough. Yet, Taoist priest. You're so bad. That was basically the situation. Section Chief Yan was speechless and his face was sullen throughout. He watched as the fleet of luxury cars drove out of the airport slowly. He couldn't even squeeze out a smile. "Well then, see you later, Section Chief Yan." Song Haoran finally said goodbye before getting on the car with the masked lady and leaving slowly. Interesting. Fire Cloud Evil God suddenly appeared beside Yan Xiaoxi and said with a smile, "What's this?" Section Chief Yan subconsciously looked at the thing in Fire Cloud Evil God's hand, a jade pendant. He remembered that his master didn't have such a thing. "This is the gift that the guy surnamed Song just gave me." Fire Cloud Evil God smiled and said, "This thing is really something. Even if you ask people to dig it out, they might not be able to find it. I hope this group of people who have always been carefree can withstand it." Suddenly, Yan Xiaoxi thought, is this the reason why 100 Tribulations Taoist and the other seniors changed their itinerary? 100 Tribulations Taoist knows, why don't we enjoy the luxurious life and follow you here to suffer the northwest wind? In the sky, in the clouds, several figures were walking through the sea of clouds. "Yeah, we still have to come to this desolate place." These presidents and vice presidents of the Dao Association were heading to the legendary ghost city, Fengdu. The purpose of 100 Tribulations Taoist trip was to find the ghost king Shao Xingma in Fengdu. "You guys," Taoist Master 100 Calamity sighed. "Are you guys blinded by the summit meeting? Have you forgotten what's coming?" "What day?" An old Taoist paused and pinched his fingers to calculate. His face changed slightly. "Hungry Ghost Festival. The Ghost Gate is going to open." 100 tribulations, Daoist said seriously. City Master Xiao sent me a letter, saying that he might not be able to withstand the opening of the Ghost Gate this time. City Master Xiao was seriously injured on Mount Tai, and hasn't recovered yet. This is really... The old Daoist finally sighed. Troubled times. Just as he was about to knock on the door, Lisa fell into doubt again. What am I doing here? Soon enough, he remembered the reason why he came here. He was going to prepare the food for the guests tonight. There was a knock on the door. When the sound was heard, Nan Xiaonan and Tang Tianlin looked at each other quickly. Several mercenaries were thrown into the room and hadn't woken up yet. It seemed that they couldn't handle the visitors. Hello, I'm Lisa, the butler of the castle. Nan Xiaonan and Tang Tianlin looked at each other again. Nan Xiaonan nodded, and then Tang Tianlin quickly walked to the back of the door and made a ready gesture. After that, Nan Xiaonan calmly opened the door of the room. She immediately saw a man in a tuxedo with serious eye bags and bloodshot eyes. Hello, Butler Lisa. Nan Xiaonan smiled and was about to release a mental attack. Unexpectedly, Butler Lisa suddenly said, What happened? Didn't the servants serve you? I remember that they should have sent food. Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but stop and said with surprise, No one came, Mr. Butler. Probably the servants are lazy. Butler Lisa rubbed his eyebrows and said, By the way, I've asked someone to repair your car. It should be repaired soon. Repair? Nan Xiaonan blinked at this time. Repair what car? Wait, did this butler treat her as Mr. Luo and Miss Yu Yi? No, they had clearly seen each other when they entered the castle? Yes. Butler Lisa nodded at this time and said, It's the best repairman in the town, so you can rest assured. In addition, this time I'm here to tell you something. What's the matter? Nan Xiaonan asked subconsciously, and at the same time signaled Tang Tianlin not to act rashly. It's like this. Butler Lisa said faintly at this time, In the evening, the castle will hold a banquet. If you don't mind, I hope you can attend. Banquet? Nan Xiaonan frowned. She really couldn't guess what the butler was thinking, so she had to be patient and asked, What banquet? Friends from afar will come to visit the owner of the castle. Butler Lisa said, The owner of the castle is very hospitable, so he will hold a banquet. The owner likes to be lively, so he hopes you two can attend. Tang Tianlin behind the door nodded quietly at this time. Nan Xiaonan smiled and said, Mr. Butler, thank you for your invitation. We will attend the banquet, but we don't have suitable clothes. Then come with me. Butler Lisa nodded at this time. I'll take you two to choose some suitable clothes. Oh yes, sir, you've been standing behind me. Did the clothes behind me get dirty? Until now, Tang Tianlin was shocked in his heart. The butler of the castle had already noticed it when he came in. He quickly glanced at Nan Xiaonan, but this time it was Nan Xiaonan who looked at him more clearly. Nothing, I'm just looking for something. Tang Tianlin walked out from behind the door at this time and said casually, I've found it. Butler Lisa nodded at this time. That's good. Then, please come with me to choose the evening clothes. This way, please. Nan Xiaonan and Tang Tianlin had to temporarily deal with the butler with doubts at this time. By the way, however, the butler of the castle suddenly called at this time. This made Nan Xiaonan and Tang Tianlin frown at the same time. Their bodies tensed up and they were about to fight, but they heard Butler Lisa say, The servants really didn't send any food. No. Oh, what a bunch of lazy people. Butler Lisa said thoughtfully, I will definitely punish them. This guy. What's wrong with him? The two couldn't help but feel puzzled. In the courtyard, in front of the flower wall, two maids suddenly came out at this time. They appeared in front of Boss Luo and Miss Maid at this time. One stretched out her left hand, and the other stretched out her right hand, and said in unison, You two, the flower wall area is forbidden to visit. We just want to take a look at it from a close distance. We don't want to go in for the time being. Boss Luo smiled at this time, but looked at the two maids in front of him. Twins. twins with extremely neat movement. You can't go near it either. The twin maids said again. That's a pity. Boss Luo shook his head and immediately said, in this case, I wonder if you two ladies can show us around this castle. The twin maids looked at each other at this time, then nodded at the same time and said in unison, yes. The butler's intention of beating people was to catch the man and woman. In this way, they could directly bring them to the butler to beat people, which would save them a lot of trouble. Then, thank you. Hashtag PS. 5984. Chapter 1765. They chatted casually. Then they got to know the names of the twin maids. The older one was Tiff, and the younger one was Tina. Probably because of Boss Luo's ability to talk about everything, they also knew that the twin maids were abandoned by their parents when they were born because they were Siamese twins. It seemed that they were reborn because of Dr. Gores in the castle. Because they were Siamese twins, although they were separated by artificial surgery, Tiff and Tina still kept an incredible synchronicity and never separated. Don't you feel inconvenient? Boss Luo asked casually. Which aspect do you mean? Both of them asked at the same time. We do everything in sync, so we won't feel inconvenienced. What's more, what Tiff likes, Tina likes, and what Tina hates, Tiff hates. So if someone can make Tiff or Tina like him, he can get Tiff and Tina. On the other hand, he will be hated by Tiff and Tina at the same time. Boss Luo blinked. He was actually referring to some trivial things in life. It seemed that he needed to slightly weaken the ability to talk about everything. Who is that? They saw the back of a crippled old man with a hunched back. He was walking out of the flower wall in the courtyard, silently sticking to the edge of the flower wall and walking further away. The old man was holding a bottle of wine in his hand, taking a sip from time to time, looking drunk. That's Mr. Sneeve, the gardener of the castle. The twin maids said in unison. He doesn't like to talk to people usually, but he does his work very well. In the castle, there were officials, family doctors, and the twin maids, as well as the bodyguards in black. It seemed that except for the castle owner and the chef, who hadn't shown up yet, Boss Luo and the maids had seen all of them in a short time. These roses are so bright. It seems that Mr. Sneeve must have spent a lot of effort on them. Boss Luo smiled slightly. The roses on the wall were bright red like fire, as if they could drip blood. After that, the twin maids took Boss Luo and Miss Maid back to their original room. The so-called tour was actually a tour of the way back. However, the butler was not here. The moment the door was opened, the two maids fell into silence. They looked at each other and soon understood everything. Butler Lisa must be acting up again. Both of you, please stay in your rooms before dark. The twin maids said in unison, because at night, if there are still people walking in the corridor, it will be more or less inconvenient. Inconvenient. The twin maids revealed a creepy smile at the same time. Then, they slowly stepped back, turned around, closed the door, and left. Boss Luo glanced at Miss Maid and suddenly smiled. Let's load. Reset. Time reverse. What a joke. The so-called loading was just the duo in the shop returning to the position where the progress bar was recorded. Boss Luo and Miss Maid who returned to the room disappeared into thin air. Then, in the next second, they appeared at the place where they were stopped by the twin maid. The main thing was that Miss Maid said that there seemed to be some useful secret medicine materials in the labyrinth. She smelled the smell. Where did Mr. Lisa go? Tiff suddenly asked. Tina doesn't know. Tiff doesn't know how Tina knows. Tina tilted her head and said. Tiff has a bad feeling. Tiff thought for a while and said. Tina also has a bad feeling. Tina nodded in agreement. Tina is very worried now. What should we do? Tiff is also very worried. What should we do? Tiff is unhappy. Tina is also unhappy now. Tina sighed. Tina wants to do happy things now. Tiff also wants to do happy things. Tiff grabbed her sister's hand and said, Let's go, Tiff will take you to do happy things. They held hands and walked into the east wing of the ancient castle in a short while. Then, they went all the way and walked into a spiral staircase that led to the underground. It seemed that the vampires liked to plant this kind of flower wall in their territory. There were several times when Boss Luo walked into the vampires' houses. He could see this kind of thing. It was like something that was iconic to them. Thorns and blood, probably because it's very suitable? Boss Luo said jokingly with a smile. There was even such a sad and beautiful style here. But in fact, as long as the flower wall was slightly pushed aside, one could see the death everywhere and hear the desperate wailing. This kind of lost leaf likes to grow in this kind of soil. At this time, Miss Maid pulled out a small blade of grass from the flower bushes. She looked at the color and seemed to be satisfied. There was a small piece of similar leaf growing here. It was probably just like picking a few leaves. It was like picking one or two fruits from the fruits that stretched out along the road in a scenic spot. Boss Luo thought for a while and finally put down a few pieces of crystal-like things. These were secret crystals, the common hard currency in the inhuman territory. A few leaves were probably worth this much or even slightly more. Suddenly, a dog barked. It turned out to be a black dog that was bigger than the average dog. Wearing a scarlet collar, the black dog was baring its sharp teeth and drooling, looking very aggressive. It seemed to be the guardian of this flower wall. Suddenly, the black hound exerted strength on its four limbs and rushed towards Boss Luo ferociously. Seeing that the ferocious black hound was about to kill Boss Luo, a sharp whistle suddenly sounded at this time. The black hound stopped in an instant, but it still looked ferocious. "It's forbidden to enter." A low, hoarse, rapid voice with a hint of anger was heard. A figure with a hunchback and a limp was walking quickly. It was the castle's gardener, Mr. Sneeve. Because it was really inconvenient to walk, he even had to hold his broken left leg with his palm and carry it as he walked. Oh, right, he was holding a shotgun in his right hand. "Go! Go! Leave here! Immediately!" Mr. Gardner roared fiercely. Then, this aggressive Mr. Gardner seemed to have tripped over something and lost his balance, falling directly to the ground. His face was directly pressed into the soil on the ground. Probably, he had to eat some soil to get in. The wretched Mr. Snakel quickly crawled up, spitting out the soil and grass in his mouth. He became even angrier, and just as he was about to curse, a white handkerchief suddenly stretched out in front of him. "I think you'll need it, sir." What kind of person was this? Mr. Snaff opened his mouth, and his anger seemed to have been extinguished. He couldn't help but be surprised. So there really was such a thing. He was the kind of guy who could calm people down with just a glance. But Mr. Sneeve instinctively didn't want to accept such kindness. He directly used the shotgun in his hand to knock it away. He even frowned and said, "Didn't anyone tell you that you can't enter the flower wall? Go, don't stay here. Otherwise, I won't be responsible for what happens." "What will happen here?" Luochu picked up the handkerchief on the ground and asked calmly. "Look, the scenery here is so charming, isn't it?" Mr. Sneeve couldn't help shaking his head, thinking that this guy probably hadn't gone out before and didn't know the depth of his background. "Did you just come here?" He suddenly frowned and asked. "Our car broke down at the foot of the mountain." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Fortunately, we met people from the castle and they helped us. Don't leave until the car is repaired." Mr. Gardner said quickly, "If you don't want to die, leave this place before it gets dark. That's all I can say. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not. Just don't blame me for not reminding you." "Well, we'll consider your suggestion, sir." Boss Luo nodded and immediately said, "Sir, you're injured." Probably because he tripped and hit his knee on a sharp stone. Not only was his trousers torn, there was even a wound. The wound was on his other leg that was fine. It was bleeding and the wound was unexpectedly deep. There were a few drops of blood on the ground, which quickly seeped into the soil, and then disappeared. Mr. Sneeve was suddenly shocked at this moment. His face even turned pale, hurriedly tearing his undershirt and hurriedly rapping his injured knee on the ground. "It's all your fault, it's all your fault. You hurt me." In all honesty, Miss Maid didn't leave anything this time. She didn't always put nails on the ground secretly. This hunchback old man indeed tripped and hurt himself because he was too excited to watch the road. Even his other leg was hurt, and now it was really inconvenient for him to walk. "Let us help you." Lucio smiled at this moment. "We've learned how to deal with wounds. Old sir, your wound looks a bit deep. If it's not treated well, it may be infected by bacteria. Or, let us help you to the family doctor in the castle?" "No. Don't send me to that guy's room." Mr. Sneeve shook his head at this moment and immediately gritted his teeth. "If you really want to help, just help me to the house over there. I live there, not in the castle. I have medicine at home. Hurry up, it's too late. Anyway, hurry up." Lucio helped Mr. Sneeve up, and then under the urging of Mr. Sneeve, they quickly walked into the flower wall. Along the way, Mr. Sneeve was still blowing the whistle hanging on his neck. When they just left, slender white thread-like things suddenly stretched out from the soil, like white nematodes, densely packed and swaying with the wind. But soon, it seemed that these white nematodes didn't find what they wanted, and shrank into the soil little by little. After a while, they arrived at the cabin where Mr. Sneeve lived. The cabin was built inside this maze of flower walls. Across the flower wall, they could even see a small willow forest on the side. Along the way, Mr. Sneeve, who kept blowing the whistle, finally stopped. When they stepped into the fence of the cabin, they could clearly feel that this gardener seemed to be relieved. The black dog followed them all the way, and now it ran under the eaves of the cabin, lying down, and became very quiet. "Well, it's safe here." Mr. Sneeve heaved a sigh of relief. "Let me go. I can do it by myself." He didn't let anyone enter his cabin, but moved into the cabin bit by bit. They heard a sound coming from inside, probably turning something over. After a while, he came out of the cabin, carrying a shabby box in his hand. Without asking for help, he began to take out the things inside, disinfect and bandage them. In the east wing of the castle, underground, after a while, the twin maids came in front of an iron door. Tiff took out the key and inserted it into the lock of the iron door, while Tina twisted the handle of the lock. Then the twin sisters reached out their hands and directly pushed the iron door open. An ear-piercing sound of the door opening could be heard. Inside the room, a strange figure quickly hid, directly under the quilt. Along the way, there were dark stone walls, stairs, and ancient decorations. However, the room behind the iron door was very delicately decorated. It was a little princess-like room with pink as the base tone, and there were all kinds of cute dolls everywhere. "Tiff is here. Tina is here too." The twin maids quickly walked to the front of the gorgeous big bed. Each of them grabbed the quilt, and then directly lifted it. Under the quilt, a figure was now trembling. Why did they say it was a figure? This was because the two of them were connected together. Their bodies were completely connected from the neck down, and they were only separated up to their legs. They were wearing a huge baby suit, and they even had a baby hat on their heads. There was also a pacifier in their mouth. This was a middle-aged man and a woman. At this moment, the moment the conjoined middle-aged man and woman saw the twin sisters, their eyes became more flustered. "Dad, Tiff is here." "Dad, Tina is here." "Mom, Tiff is here." "Mom, Tina is here." "Did you miss us?" Click. The iron door was now slowly closed. Hashtag. Chapter 1766. Mr. Sneeve didn't speak until the wound was treated and bandaged. He started to speak after the wound was treated, then he poured a mouthful of liquor into his mouth, and sprayed a handful of liquor onto his wound. It was a pretty hardcore disinfection method. Whether it was useful or not was another matter. "You guys are special guys, right?" Mr. Sneeve raised his head at this time. That cloudy white eyeball looked rather frightening, but the other intact eye was surprisingly clear. At this moment, Mr. Snakel didn't look like he was drunk at all. Are we special? Mr. Snakel shook his head, as if he was sneering, and then sighed. Guys like you will appear every year. They are all guys who came to explore the secrets of the ancient castle. I've seen a lot of normal people like you. How can they be so calm? So, are you demon hunters or explorers? This place is deserted. Who will believe you when you say you're tourists? Well, we can barely be considered as adventurers. Boss Luo smiled and said, We do like to explore mysteries. I guess so. Mr. Sneeve shook his head. You don't have the smell of demon hunters. Listen, I don't know where you know about this castle, and I don't want to know your purpose of coming here. But if you're just here to explore, you can leave. This is not a suitable place for adventure. Mr. Sneeve should be the castle's gardener? Boss Luo thought for a while. Won't the owner be angry if you drive away the guests of the castle? No matter how angry he is, he won't kill me. Mr. Sneeve snorted. But he won't let you go easily. Listen, after this flower wall, you'll reach the courtyard of the east wing. There's a way out at the corner of the third pagoda tree. Before 6 in the evening, you should leave that way. Why 6 p.m.? Miss Maid suddenly asked. 6 p.m. Mr. Sneeve looked at the two deeply with a taboo face. He'll wake up. The owner of the castle? Yes. Maybe he's not as scary as you think. Mr. Sneeve waved his hand. Young people are always like this, I used to think. Forget it, I've said what I can say. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not. Remember, before 6 p.m., if you don't want to die, come here. Mr. Sneeve, do you want to leave here? Boss Luo suddenly asked. You know that way, you prepared it for yourself, right? That's enough. The gardener of the castle suddenly became furious. He frantically picked up everything around him that he could get his hands on, and then threw it out like a madman, using it as a driving force. But somehow, he couldn't hit them even though they were so close. In the end, the enraged Mr. Gardener raised his shotgun to the sky and fired a few shots. After that, Mr. Snakel rushed into the wooden house and slammed the door shut. Leave my house. Now! Black Hound under the eaves became ferocious because of its owner's irritation, barking crazily. Boss Luo gave Black Hound a look to be quiet. Black Hound instantly lay down with its tail between its legs. It seems that the progress bar stops here. Boss Luo said casually. Then go back first. Maybe you can trigger something. Mr. Snaff, who was in the house, couldn't hear them, but if he did, he would probably become irritable again. Did these two fellows really think that they were playing a game here, and that they could trigger the storyline by running around randomly? He really couldn't hear anything. After a while, the door of the cabin slowly opened. Mr. Sneeve looked out from the crack of the door and found that there was no one in the small yard in front of the door. Only then did he open the door completely. Using the shotgun as a crutch, he limped out. They really left and didn't hide anywhere. Mr. Sneeve muttered, Here are all the corpses of young guys like you. If you're not afraid of death, then... He shook his head and was about to enter the cabin again when he saw something on the stool in front of the door. It should be something left by the young man and woman. Mr. Snaff frowned as he picked up the thing that was placed on the stool. There was a piece of paper that was pressed there. The general content was that the medicine in the bottle was very effective for healing wounds. If you don't mind, you can use it. The gardener looked at the bottle in his hand, then looked at the note in his hand, and suddenly became absent-minded. After a while, he let out a long sigh, then stared at his black dog and muttered, You old dog, why did you suddenly become so quiet? Black dog. Black dog still had its tail between its legs. Bang bang bang. What's that sound? In the corridor, Tang Tianlin couldn't help but frown and ask. He knew what the sound was, it was obviously gunshots, but he obviously asked the obvious. Mr. Lissa, the steward of the castle, who was walking in front of him, said indifferently, Maybe it's a hunter nearby. Hunters often appear here, don't worry. It's very safe in the castle. That's good. Tang Tianlin nodded and then glanced at Nan Xiaonan, and then said, "Mr. Steward, how long will it take? We seem to have been walking for a while." Moreover, the steward said that he would take them to choose the clothes for the party. But no matter how they looked at it, it didn't seem like they were going to a room where clothes were stored. They even passed the west wing and entered the east wing of the castle. They didn't go through the maze of flower walls but the corridor between the east wing and the west wing. "We'll be there soon," the steward said indifferently. "Remember, when you enter the castle, you only need to listen to Nelson's words. But at the same time, in the castle, the first one to listen to is the owner of the castle, the second one is me as the steward, and the last one is Nelson." Lady Nan and Tang Tianlin couldn't help looking at each other. The steward seemed to be talking about something else? Besides, who the F***ck is Nelson? But soon, the two of them understood who this Mr. Nelson was. He was the chef of the castle. The destination was the kitchen. When they saw the chef, he was lying on the floor and snoring. At the same time, they could even see some small things like cockroaches and geckos all over the floor. There were even spiders. Some of them even crawled on Mr. Nelson's body. This was obviously a scene that most women would be disgusted by. When Chef Nelson heard the voice, he slowly got up and yawned. "Dear Mr. Lisa. Oh my God, it's not even 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Nelson, these are the two helpers I sent to you," the steward said indifferently. "Some time ago, you kept saying that the kitchen was understaffed. Now I've sent them to you. Remember to be punctual in the future." "When did I say that?" "Oh yes, I did say that." Mr. Nelson looked at Tang Tianlin and Nan Xiaonan behind the steward and then nodded. "Okay, I've received them. Is there anything else, Mr. Steward?" "We'll have a distinguished guest tonight." The steward thought for a moment and said, "It's Mr. Varley's sister, Miss Gong Lina. Remember to prepare her favorite food." "Got it." The chef nodded weakly at this time. "Is there anything else? Do your job well." The steward waved his hand at this time. His polished leather shoes rubbed half a circle on the floor and then went straight out of the kitchen. Tang Tianlin and Nan Xiaonan were left behind, staring at each other at this time. They both felt that things were inconceivable. What were they supposed to do with the steward just now? Chef Nelson punched a jar and put it on the ground. The spiders on the ground began to slowly crawl towards the jar. When a spider passed by Nan Xiaonan's feet, out of female instinct, she dodged instantly. "Be careful, don't step on my little cuties," the chef said at this time. "These are my little babies, don't step on them." "I'm sorry," Nan Xiaonan said subconsciously. "It's nothing." The chef waved at this time and then said, "I guess you're not assigned to work in the kitchen." Tang Tianlin nodded. "I didn't even mention that the kitchen is understaffed. Don't worry too much about it. Steward Lisa's memory is not very good, you'll slowly get used to it in the future." Chef Nelson said, "But don't worry since you're here, just work here. By the way, what were you supposed to do originally?" "Bodyguard." Tang Tianlin's heart moved at this time. "Bodyguard? You?" The chef looked up and down at the two, muttering, "The standard of recruitment of bodyguards has changed now. Forget it, since you're here, just do as you see fit. The room next door is my room, as long as you don't go in, you can just stay in the kitchen. By the way, lift your foot, you stepped on it." At this time, a small gecko was struggling to break its tail from Tang Tianlin's foot and then quickly crawling away. "I still need to sleep for half an hour." The chef went to his room at this time. "Remember to wake me up at 4:30, I have to prepare the food. Miss Gong Lina?" I hope the steward remembered correctly. The sound of the door closing. Nan Xiaonan and Tang Tianlin were silent for a moment, then Nan Xiaonan moved her lips and said, "What should we do now? Are we still going to the party? Do you have a way, like those mercenaries, to knock this chef out?" Tang Tianlin thought for a while and said, "Since we're already here at the East Wing, I'll try." With that, Nan Xiaonan softened her footsteps and approached the chef's room little by little. She put her ear on the door for a while, after hearing the sound of snoring, then gently opened the door a little. But the moment the door was opened, something suddenly rushed out. Nan Xiaonan was shocked and subconsciously stepped back, and instinctively wanted to open her star creation space. Usually, when she encountered such a special danger, this otherworldly powerhouse would instantly throw hundreds of enchantments on her body. But she forgot that she was not the same as before. There were no enchantments at all, and those powerful star creation creatures in the star creation space did not appear. White silk threads shot out from the door, but in an instant, Nan Xiaonan was completely wrapped up by these white threads. She looked like a silkworm cocoon. She fell to the ground, and only a small part of her face was exposed. Seeing this, Tang Tianlin rushed forward to rescue Nan Xiaonan, but just as he ran over, he was met with white silk threads. He was also trapped and directly tied up like a dumpling, and fell beside Nan Xiaonan. The door of the chef's room was already open, and they saw at the same time that there were 6 huge eyes looking at them from the door. Inside the room, there was a gigantic spider, and the chef, Mr. Nelson, was sleeping peacefully on the bed beneath the spider's abdomen. The huge spider's long legs were trying to stretch out from the door. Even it seemed to want to crawl out, but it could not pass through the narrow door. Seeing that it could not crawl out, the huge spider began to pull the silk threads it spat out to tie the 2 people up, trying to pull its prey into the room. Seeing this, Nan Xiaonan was shocked and quickly twisted her body. Her tied legs swung hard at this time, and directly closed the door of the room. But the spider silk did not break because of this, and it continued to pull. In the end, because of the door, Tang Tianlin and Nan Xiaonan were stuck on the door, unable to move. The spider silk was so tough that even if Tang Tianlin activated his mutated arm, he could not break free. It even tightened more and more, gradually strangling him to the point that he felt suffocated. At this time, Nan Xiaonan gritted her teeth and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. She rubbed her feet together and rubbed off her shoes. Then, she slowly moved her feet towards the kitchen knife. As long as she could directly touch the object. This way, she would be able to give Xing Chuang life. Unfortunately, this spider silk seemed to be a high-grade item. With her current recovery rate, she was unable to use the spider silk to create Xing Chuang. Otherwise, she would have been out of danger long ago. Thinking of this, her feet finally touched the handle of the kitchen knife. Xing Chuang. It's done. The kitchen knife that was given life suddenly stood up and jumped onto Nan Xiaonan under Tang Tianlin's shocked gaze. Then, it slowly began to cut the spider silk. After cutting for a long time, not a single strand was broken. This powerhouse from another world seemed to feel insulted. ########PS 6084